Drift Stories.
This chapter serves as a prologue. While you are free to skip ahead, I highly recommend you read it. It is quite captivating and will not detain you long. In a world where ignorance afforded a kind of peace and knowledge often meant hardship, a lone scientist stumbled upon a theory. It was an idea as profound as it was perplexing: the prison planet theory. This radical concept posited that their world was nothing more than a cosmic jail, designed to trap humanity in an endless cycle of reincarnation. Upon death, a person's soul would be cleansed of all memory, only to be reborn onto the same planet, condemned to a life devoid of true purpose or meaning. Most scientists would have dismissed such a notion as pure lunacy, yet this particular individual, already notorious among his peers and the public as the mad scientist, chose to delve into its depths. Thus began his quest, driven by an unwavering need to unearth the truth, if any, hidden within the hypothesis. His approach was always singular. While others peered into the heavens, lost in awe of the cosmos, he scoured the earth, seeking answers in the subtle clues beneath the boundless blue sky. As his contemporaries launched rockets to distant worlds, he pored over ancient texts, extracting forgotten wisdom from civilizations that spoke of realms beyond their own. They charted stars with advanced instruments and scientific method. He wandered through crumbling ruins, heeding the whispers of a forgotten past, convinced the answers were far closer than anyone imagined. Finally, after years of relentless toil, having exhausted his resources and dedicated his very life to the pursuit, he found it. Some might deem it an invention, others a discovery, but such labels held little weight in the grand scheme. What truly mattered was that he had located a minute rupture in the fabric of reality, akin to a fissure in a prison wall. A gateway, a rift, leading to an entirely different plane of existence. He had spent the majority of his life searching for this gateway. Now, having found it, he was determined to dedicate the remainder of his days to exploring whatever lay beyond. However, before he could embark on this ultimate journey, two critical questions demanded answers at any cost. Yet, fate intervened before he could ever begin. No one, not even the mad scientist himself, could pinpoint when or why it began, but it unfurled in a single terrifying instant. One moment, the firmament blazed with innumerable streaks of light, searing across the sky like shooting stars, leaving incandescent trails in their wake. The next, these fiery paths plunged into the earth, vanishing in a blinding flash before the ground erupted in concussive explosions. This was it, the dawn of a global conflict. But this time, the weapons were not swords, but humanity's ultimate destroyers, nuclear warheads. Until that day, no one had truly questioned the annihilative power of a single nuclear missile. No one dared to fathom what thousands could unleash. Now, they were forced to confront this cataclysm as their stark reality, a brutal affirmation of what they already knew. In a single night, cities crumbled to dust, homes became graves for their inhabitants, rivers and lakes evaporated, leaving behind only gaping craters, forests ignited into infernal pyres, consuming every living thing within them. The inferno was hellish, and its aftermath proved no less cruel. Governments collapsed, nations fractured, and order dissolved completely. While some perished in the initial blasts, countless others succumbed in the ensuing years, victims of starvation, exposure, and the virulent diseases spawned by the radiation and chemical weapons that poisoned the land. Humanity had orchestrated its own demise, yet miraculously, hope had not been entirely extinguished. Humans, ever a species defined by their capacity to learn from error, to rise from adversity, and to rebuild from ashes, proved true to form. After many long years, survivors began to emerge from their subterranean sanctuaries. Among them, 12 individuals distinguished themselves. They possessed not only the foresight to construct bunkers and outlast the devastation, but also the resources, influence, and leadership acumen necessary to spearhead humanity's resurgence. In a world scarred and resource-depleted, each claimed a territory, establishing shelter cities, where order was restored and society could tentatively thrive once more. Generations passed. Under the stewardship of these figures, who would come to be known as the city managers, life on the planet gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy, albeit one forever altered. Across these new domains, monuments were erected and daily sermons delivered, serving as stark reminders of past follies and fervent vows never to repeat them. But one vital truth had long been forgotten. The once renowned mad scientist had vanished from collective memory, just as he had disappeared amidst the cataclysmic explosions of that fateful day. No one truly knew the extent of his discovery, nor did anyone have the chance to answer the two profound questions he had posed to himself. Was Earth truly a prison, constructed to eternally confine humanity? And if so, what choices or misdeeds had condemned their souls to such an incarceration? The news tenad of PD 20 and after 10th, Yotitin 15 of the Requiem calendar. University campus, Shelter City 9. I told you to keep your damn hands off her, didn't I? The words were barely out of his mouth before a fist slammed into the other boy's gut. The impact buckled the boy's body, eliciting a sharp gasp just in time for a second fist to connect with his face, sending him sprawling onto the cold, unforgiving floor. Books and papers scattered, skittering across the ground. Their clatter was punctuated by a few muffled snickers from the students observing the scene. Yet the fallen boy remained impassive, as if this brutal treatment were a familiar routine, and began to collect his scattered belongings. Cole loomed over him, still simmering with rage. "What? You think this is a game?" he snarled, cracking his knuckles. "Are you deaf? Or just plain stupid?" He seized a handful of the boy's disheveled black hair, yanking his head back to force him to meet his gaze. Without a moment's hesitation, he drove his fist into the boy's face again. A few drops of blood spattered onto the floor. The boy went still. A faint tremor ran through his shoulders. His dull, dark brown eyes flickered towards the crimson droplets. Then, nothing. Only a slow, even breath, as if the entire assault were no more than a minor inconvenience. He wiped the blood from his lip with the back of his hand, barely glancing up. "I thought you genetic salads were supposed to be stronger," he mumbled, his voice flat and calm, almost bored, as he resumed gathering his things. "What the hell did you just say?" Cole demanded, stunned. "I said," the boy replied, still not looking at him, "even my pure-blood little sister hits harder than you, moron." "You little," Cole's voice fractured with unadulterated fury. "No please, no panic, only calm, cutting insults." His fists hadn't broken the boy, his threats had fallen flat. And now, this reject had the audacity to mock him. No one had ever spoken to Cole like that, especially not some dirt-blood nobody. Humiliation churned in his gut, fueling the fire of his wounded pride. Grinding his teeth, hands trembling with rage, he lifted his foot, poised to stomp it down on the boy's head and end it. Just then, a voice cut through the tension. "Hey, Cole, that's enough." One of his friends intervened, stepping forward with a nervous glance. "He's had enough." "Yeah, man, chill," another muttered, shifting uncomfortably. "Sure, he's a freak, but he's also Victor's close friend. Keep pushing, and we're the ones who'll end up in deep trouble." Cole froze, his foot still suspended in midair. His jaw clenched, frustration boiling in his eyes. But the warning resonated. With a guttural grunt, he slowly lowered his foot and backed away, fixing the freak with one final glare. "Let's go," he mumbled, turning sharply. The others followed, a couple casting uneasy glances back as they trailed after him. Just like that, the hallway emptied. leaving behind only silence and a mess of scattered pages. The boy remained unmoving for a moment. Then, slowly, he collected the last of his belongings and rose. Lest no one taught them never to mess with the quiet guy at school. He chuckled, only to wince as a sharp sting lanced through his lip. He touched a hand to his mouth, feeling the slick warmth of blood. For a second, he stared at the crimson smudge on his fingers. There was something about the color, oddly soothing. He brushed his hand across his mouth, tasting the faint metallic tang as he exhaled. "Doesn't hit the same anymore," he murmured. "Might be time to pick up a new hobby." Without another word, he turned and walked away, as if nothing had happened. He had taken only a few steps when a loud, familiar voice called out, "Hey, Adyr." Turning his head, he spotted the source, another student so lean he looked perpetually on the verge of starvation. The boy was already striding toward him, his pace quick and unburdened, a wide, almost foolish grin plastered across his face. "Yo, Victor, thought you'd already gone home," Adyr said, a faint, perfectly feigned smirk tugging at his busted lips. "Nah, class ended a while ago," came the reply, Victor's gaze casually sweeping over him. When his eyes landed on the cut, his grin widened. "Damn, man. Got your ass kicked again? That's what you get for messing with the queen of the school, huh?" He clapped Adyr's shoulder, chuckling. Adyr shrugged, not missing a beat. "Told you, it's not like that." "I'm just helping her with piano lessons," he replied, trying to sound as uninterested as possible. He feigned indifference to the rumors, but deep down he knew precisely what he was doing. He thrived on the attention, especially the kind that came from bullies. He wasn't a masochist who enjoyed physical pain, but the blows served a purpose, a method to stave off a more profound addiction. Since his reincarnation on this parallel Earth 18 years ago, he had sworn off taking lives. Yet that vow had left a gnawing void within him, a hunger he constantly struggled to manage. Breaking such an addiction was never easy. Yeah, whatever," Victor said dismissively, waving off Adyr's explanation. He leaned in closer, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Maybe next time, teach her something with wind instruments. Who knows? Maybe she's better at blowing." He chuckled, clearly pleased with his own crude wit. Adyr didn't even spare him a glance as he sighed, his voice laced with annoyance. "One day, that sense of humor of yours is going to get you killed, Victor." Victor paused, but only for a beat, before scoffing. "Hey, come on, what kind of joke is that? Don't start pulling death flags on me, man. I've got plenty of years left." His steps matched Adyr's as they walked side by side. "Anyway," Victor continued, his tone taking on a slightly more serious edge, "I came looking for you for a reason. The game releases tonight. You didn't forget, did you? It was the first virtual reality game to emerge since the World War. The project had begun as a mere whisper, spreading across local internet forums and news reports a decade prior. Initially, most dismissed it. Why would a world still reeling from an apocalypse squander precious resources on a game? But as time wore on, the whispers intensified. The turning point arrived a few years ago when the 12 city managers confirmed the rumors and announced their direct involvement in the project. From that moment, the game transcended mere rumor. It became a phenomenon, something everyone desperately wanted to be a part of. "Yeah, I know," Adyr said, his voice flat as he continued walking without breaking pace, his lack of enthusiasm palpable. "Not interested." Victor froze for a moment, caught completely off guard. "What? What the hell did you just say?" he blurted out, rushing to keep up. The idea of playing without his best friend hadn't even crossed his mind. Especially not this game, something that was shaping up to be bigger than anything before it. Victor hesitated for a second, uncertainty flickering across his face. Then, as if making up his mind, he grabbed Adyr's arm, stopping him in his tracks. His usual playful expression vanished, replaced by something far more serious. "There's something else you need to know," he said quietly, his voice dropping. He paused again, weighing his words before leaning in. My father told me the game is using the latest genetic mutation research. Adyr glanced at Victor, a spark of curiosity igniting in his eyes. Genetic mutation had been the hottest topic of the past century. It wasn't merely a solution for most human ailments, from minor illnesses to terminal diseases like cancer. It also offered a means to vastly extend one's lifespan and unlock physical abilities far surpassing the limits of ordinary humans. However, like all fateful gifts, it came with a catch. Only the wealthy, the influential, and their families had access to it. The sole other beneficiaries were elite military personnel, those handpicked and sworn to protect the city from external threats. Is this some kind of joke? Adyr thought, his brow furrowing. They're just handing out something like this to the public? It's too good to be true. He was about to ask Victor if he was truly serious, if his father's words even held any weight, when the true reason he had cultivated a friendship with Victor resurfaced in his mind. His father, Henry Bates, Minister of Defense of Shelter City 9, the most powerful man in the city, second only to the city manager himself, with complete control over the mutant army known as the Superhuman Task Force. Anything that came from this man's mouth would be no casual remark. "So I've got your attention now, right?" Victor asked, a smirk tugging at the corners of his lips. He had just divulged information that was certainly not meant for public consumption, confident it would be enough to penetrate his friend's stubborn indifference. But to his surprise, Adyr's walls of indifference were thicker than he had anticipated. "Still not playing," Adyr replied. Victor stared at him, eyes wide with disbelief, as if Adyr had personally offended him. Okay, just tell me why," he said, his voice a mix of confusion and hurt. This game might have been Victor's only shot at finally acquiring a genetic mutation. So whatever Adyr's reason was, it had better be a damn good one. Adyr sighed. "Do you know how much the game helmet costs?" Victor pondered for a moment before answering. "I don't know. 15,000. Like every rich kid, he was utterly clueless when it came to price tags. Adyr let out a slow, tired breath at the response. Victor's complete lack of basic awareness never failed to unsettle him. "It's 7,199 credits," he stated flatly. Victor shrugged, completely unfazed. "Oh, cheaper than I thought," he said, that same clueless grin still plastered on his face. Adyr's thoughts turned cold for a moment. This guy might just end up being my first victim in this life. He forced a smile. "It's not cheap. Not even close. Do you know what a low-class family earns in a month? Mine, for example." Before the idiot could spout another clueless guess, Adyr cut him off, his voice sharpening, each word landing with weight. "My mom's the only one working. She makes 600 credits a month. That's actually considered decent where we come from. I get 100 from the university as a scholarship. That puts us at 700. He paused just long enough for it to sink in. "Now imagine we don't spend a single credit. No food, no rent, no electricity, nothing. We'd still need to save for over 10 months just to afford one helmet." As Adyr spoke, his eyes instinctively tracked the subtle shifts in Victor's expression. First, a slight twitch beneath his eye. Then, the tightening of his jaw as he began to grit his teeth. And finally, in a tone sharper than usual, Victor snapped, "You jerk!" Without another word, he spun around and stormed off, his steps quick and heavy, each one louder than the last. Apparently, he was angry about something, but Adyr didn't seem even slightly bothered. He completely ignored him and glanced down at his wristwatch, noticing the hour hand resting on 5 and the minute hand pointing to 1. "Huh, better not miss the bus," he muttered, then turned and continued walking quickly. It took him 5 minutes to exit the faculty building. As soon as Adyr stepped outside, he felt the undeniable change. The warm, filtered air within the building gave way to the harsh, unfiltered reality of the world beyond. Though it was summer, the air felt unnaturally cool, not refreshing, but dry and metallic, each breath leaving a faint sting in his throat. Overhead, thick yellowish clouds blanketed the sky, casting a sickly hue over the campus. They hung low and heavy, like an ominous warning. Rain was coming, the kind that didn't just soak through clothes, but irritated the skin and left behind a lingering chemical scent. He pulled out a cheap cloth mask and slipped it on, then adjusted a pair of worn plastic goggles over his eyes. The air wasn't deadly on contact, but prolonged exposure left one's throat burning and skin itching in unscratchable patches. It took him about 20 minutes to reach the bus stop at the edge of campus, just in time. A flicker of relief passed through him. Due to the Resource Conservation Act, there were only 2 buses a day, the first in the morning and this one. If he missed it, he would be stuck walking the 3-hour route home, potentially under contaminated rain. Even for someone like Adyr, that was an unpleasant prospect. As he approached, he spotted a small group of students near the stop, their postures slumped with the weight of the day. He walked up without a word, quietly observing. Like him, they wore cheap cloth masks and basic goggles to shield their eyes. Unlike the wealthy students with gene-enhanced skin, the commoners like them had to protect what little nature had bestowed. Their uniforms were faded, colors washed out, and edges fraying, a silent yet clear indication of their origins. They were his kind, the poor, the unmodified. Each had earned their place at Shelter City 9's sole university through raw talent and determination, yet they remained the quiet 1% no one ever spoke of. Not long after the bus quietly pulled up to the stop, Adyr was the last to step inside, to Unipond. He took the first empty seat he found, indifferent to comfort or space. In a world like this, simply being able to ride a vehicle was already a luxury. After a short ride, the bus turned onto a wide street, lined with rows of 2-story buildings on each side. Though the houses were small and dull, painted in nothing but shades of grey, they were still considered one of the city's better residential areas. Soon after, Adyr got off the bus and walked up to the door of one of the houses. He glanced at his wristwatch, just a few minutes past 6, then pulled out his keys and unlocked the door. A wave of warm air, mingled with the scent of cooked tomatoes, greeted him. A familiar, cheerful voice followed right after. "Welcome back, brother." Adyr looked up and saw a smiling head pop out from the kitchen doorway. "Hey, Neva, what's for dinner? Smells good." She was only a year younger than Adyr, with short, shoulder-length hair as dark as night. Unlike her brother, her eyes were a striking light blue, creating a sharp contrast against her fair skin. "Tomato soup," she replied with a mischievous grin. Realizing the subtle frown that had appeared on her brother's face, she added, "I know you don't like it, but it's the end of the month. It's the only thing we have left." She disappeared back into the kitchen, only to return a second later with a concerned look. "Did you get into a fight again?" she asked, eyes narrowing as they scanned his face. "No?" Adyr answered, slipping off his shoes. "I just slipped and fell. Neva wasn't buying it." "Brother, that's the 2nd time this week. If the bullies get too annoying, just tell them your sister's more than happy to kick their asses." She flexed her thin, bony arms in mock threat. To her, with no father figure around, her brother had always been the smartest and coolest person in the world. She couldn't imagine a scenario where he wasn't in control, so she brushed it off with a light-hearted joke. Adyr chuckled. "Yeah, I told them that. You know what? They actually backed off." Then, a bit more seriously, he added, "Just don't tell Marielle, all right? No need to make her worry." Neva giggled. "All right. Just leave your clothes in the bathroom. I'll get them washed before she gets back." "You're the best," Adyr said with a thumbs up before heading upstairs, where his room and the bathroom were located. He changed out of his clothes, tossed his uniform into the laundry bag, and grabbed a wet tissue to wipe himself down. He glanced at his reflection, checking for any visible signs of the beating. Only a faint bruise had surfaced on his pale, sickly skin. Once he was finished, he checked the time. 6:28. Time to head downstairs. The table was already set for him. One bowl of tomato soup, a small piece of bread, and a few pickles on the side, just a single serving. It was clear that Neva had already eaten, and their mother hadn't returned from work yet. "Brother, clean up the table and handle the dishes after you eat, okay? I'm heading upstairs to do the laundry," Neva called out as she made her way up. "All right," Adyr replied, easing himself into the chair. He stared at the bowl in front of him. The soup looked redder than usual, so vivid he could almost swear it was brighter than any other day. His empty stomach and the low grumbling from within were enough to push him into motion. He picked up the spoon and dipped it into the soup. That's when it started. "Not this crap again," he muttered, as a cold sweat crept across his forehead. His unfocused gaze flickered, landing on two round shapes rising in the soup side by side, unmoving. Too familiar. Adyr's gaze pierced the tomato soup, and it seemed to stare back. Two perfectly round shapes floated on the surface, unmoving, watching. A subtle shift began, then accelerated. His vision bled red, a crimson tide slowly washing over the room until every detail mirrored the soup's unsettling hue. He recognized it, felt the creeping dread of what was to come, the inevitable, but escape was already impossible. Then the voice. Flat, cold, distant. Its echo resonated not from the confines of the room, but from an unsettling closeness. "Stop," Adyr choked out, his voice a tremor. Yet the voice persisted. Instinctively, he squeezed his eyes shut. Darkness had always been his refuge. But even there it found him. "Son, eat your meal. We wouldn't want your sister to go to waste, would we?" His eyes snapped open, a desperate plea for reality, but light only brought the vision with it. He saw the face. Young, with long blonde hair, she gazed at him from hollow, empty sockets. Thick, red tears streamed down her pale cheeks. Then her lips, almost colorless, parted. And just as suddenly, it was gone. The crimson tint faded. The ghastly face vanished. In its place stood Neva, her brow furrowed with concern, her voice a gentle inquiry. "Brother, are you okay?" Adyr blinked at her, his eyes unfocused, striving to convince himself that he was truly back, that the nightmare of childhood trauma had receded. He tried to speak, but his breathing remained ragged. "Fine. I'm sorry," Neva murmured, her voice soft with worry as she embraced him tightly, offering what solace she could. "I didn't know the trauma was still there." Of course, the trauma she referred to was not the true dark one from his past life, but the carefully constructed narrative he'd woven for this world. Reincarnated as a baby, Adyr had been found outside the city and brought to the orphanage. 8 years passed there before Marielle, an orphanage worker, adopted him. Whenever his peculiar habits surfaced, like his aversion to soup, he'd invariably blame the orphanage and its dreadful kitchen staff. "It's okay, it's not your fault," Adyr replied quietly, allowing his sister to comfort him. "I'll make you something else. You don't have to eat this," Neva quickly offered, seizing the soup bowl and hurrying toward the kitchen. "It's been happening more often, and this time I almost didn't come back," Adyr thought, carefully releasing the spoon he'd been clutching. A faint smear of blood stained the handle and his fingers. That subtle, sharp sting had been his tether, pulling him back just in time. Pain, as always, was the only force potent enough to anchor him to reality. He grabbed a napkin, wiping the blood away just as Neva returned, a plate balanced in her hands. "We still had some canned salami, so I made you a sandwich. Is that all right?" Neva asked softly, her voice laced with anxiety. "It's perfect. Thanks." He managed a small, tired smile, lifting the sandwich for a bite before a knock at the door interrupted him. "Is that Marielle?" he inquired, lowering the sandwich slightly. "I don't think so. Mom said she'd be working late." Neva responded, already moving toward the hall. "I'll get it. You go ahead and eat." Shortly after, Neva reappeared, struggling to hold a large box, her expression a mix of puzzlement and surprise. "This came for you," she announced, setting it on the table. The box, though not heavy, was notably large. Yet its size wasn't what truly surprised her. All deliveries in the city went through a single, expensive logistics agency. Whoever sent this clearly had money to spare. "Do you know what it is? Who sent it?" she asked eagerly, inching closer, clearly hoping her brother would open it immediately. Adyr rose, calmly beginning to unbox the package, betraying no surprise, as if he'd anticipated its arrival. As he lifted the flaps, a small note rested neatly atop the contents, waiting to be read. "Yayu jerk." He exhaled softly through his nose, a sound somewhere between a sigh and a smirk. "It's from a friend," he stated casually. Neva leaned in, her eyes wide with curiosity. As he pulled back the final flap, revealing the interior, she gasped sharply. "Wait, is that a game helmet?" Like everyone in the 12 cities, Neva had heard the buzz about the upcoming VRMMO, but beyond the excitement, what stuck with her most was the exorbitant cost of the gear. This was no minor gift. "I can't wait to pass the entrance exams and start making rich friends like you." Neva sighed dramatically. She too yearned to play the game. Who didn't? But according to online forums, once activated, a game helmet synced to the user's brainwaves, rendering it unusable by anyone else. Borrowing her brother's was out of the question. As she pondered this, transforming the thought into fuel for her studies, another knock at the door startled her. "Now, who could that be?" she mumbled, shaking off her daydream. She went to the door again and returned with yet another box, this one even larger, carefully balanced in her arms. "Let me guess. Another rich friend?" she quipped, an eyebrow raised. "I guess," Adyr replied, his tone uncertain. Unlike the first, this package had been entirely unexpected. As he opened the box, the first thing visible was a cake, sealed within a clear container. It glistened with a rich red glaze, adorned with what appeared to be fresh, glossy cherries. "Ah! Is that a cake? Are those cherries? Sour cherries?" Neva squealed like a fangirl, her eyes shining brighter than when she'd seen the game helmet. Who could blame her? A cake topped with fresh fruit was a luxury someone in her position might experience only once, perhaps twice a year if luck smiled upon her. She swiftly lifted the cake from the box, revealing another game helmet beneath it, along with a second note. Unlike Victor's sloppily scrawled message, this one was on eye-catching pink paper, exuding a faint, sweet aroma. The handwriting was elegant and deliberate, clearly crafted with care. "A small gesture to show my gratitude. I hope you'll accept it." At the bottom, like a signature, was the name, Selena White. Selena White. Neva tore her eyes from the cake, squinting at the name. "Why does that sound familiar?" she muttered aloud. A second later, recognition flashed across her face. "Wait, what? No way. That's her? You know her?" Adyr asked, genuinely surprised. Neva spun around, looking at him as if he'd just questioned the wetness of water. "What do you mean? Do I know her?" "Of course I do. Everyone my age knows who Selena White is." She began ticking off points on her fingers, her voice buzzing with excitement. She was ranked #1 in Young Influentials Monthly, super famous for her charity work, especially with orphans, crazy smart, and I mean, come on, have you seen her? She's absolutely gorgeous. Her tone then shifted, becoming a touch more serious. "And her mom, chairwoman of the Angel Wing Foundation, also happens to own the orphanage where our mom works." She paused, a doubtful look crossing her face. "Brother, are you seriously dating our mom's boss's daughter?" "I'm just helping her with her piano lessons," Adyr replied casually, slowly lifting the game helmet from its box. "Piano lessons? Since when do you know how to play piano?" Neva asked suspiciously, raising an eyebrow. Before she could press further, Adyr interrupted. "It's for you," he said, extending the helmet toward her. For a moment, Neva simply stared at the sleek, grey device in his hands, its design akin to a motorcycle helmet, sans visor. Adyr watched her face cycle through a dozen expressions, as if she were engaged in an internal debate. Finally, she spoke. "I think you should send it back," she said softly. "It's far too expensive. I can't accept something like that." After a brief pause, she added, "And with the entrance exams just 2 months away, I don't want to get distracted by a game." "That's a smart call," Adyr replied with a smile, placing the helmet back in its box. He then reached for the cake, intending to return it as well, but her hand, firm and unyielding, stopped him. "Leave the cake," Neva said, her voice steady, her expression uncharacteristically serious. It was clear the cake was staying. After finishing his meal and tidying the dishes, Adyr retreated to his room. It was a modest space, just enough for a single bed, a wardrobe, and a simple desk. On the desk lay a battered laptop, a gift from his university, 2 half-melted candles, and the game helmet Selena had sent, now carefully repacked in its box, awaiting its return. For a teenage boy, the room was remarkably Spartan, orderly and clean. He sat on the edge of his bed, holding the other helmet, Victor's gift, and checked the time. 10 minutes until the power cut, and the game launch, he murmured. In low-income districts like theirs, scheduled blackouts were routine, a city measure to conserve energy. Yet, the fact that the launch of the decade's most anticipated game coincided with one of these outages felt odd. He picked up the instruction manual beside him and leafed through it. Not a word about the game itself, only technical specifications and safety warnings. Following the guidelines, he powered up the device. A small digital display near the helmet's base glowed. 100%. According to the manual, this indicated a full internal battery, sufficient for approximately 3 hours of use. It meant that after 3 hours of gameplay, he'd have to await the morning's electricity to recharge the helmet and continue playing. Such were the many inconveniences of poverty in a world still scarred by apocalypse. Adyr lit the candles first, then settled the game helmet onto his head and waited. Complete darkness enveloped him, save for a pulsing green neon countdown at the center of his vision. He watched silently as the numbers dwindled. The instant the countdown hit 0, a sudden, powerful pull seized his entire being. Everything went black, and for a few seconds, all sensation vanished. It was more than a visual blackout. He felt his entire body shifting, as if space itself warped around him. For a fleeting second, he considered removing the helmet to ascertain what was occurring, but then his vision and senses surged back. "This," Adyr breathed in disbelief. He was suspended high in the sky, still clad in his familiar pajamas, floating weightlessly. Below him stretched a vast, breathtaking world. It wasn't just the visuals that were real, it was everything. He felt the gentle, cool breeze on his skin, the unfamiliar scent of clean, untouched air filling his lungs. It was too real. As he savored this surreal moment, observing and feeling glowing green text suddenly materialized before him. Moments later, more text shimmered into existence, like fireflies drawn to a distant sun. One of the 4 main paths, created by the god Astral. He shaped the first solid form from the chaos, giving structure to the formless. It represents everything physical. One of the 4 main paths, created by the goddess Aetheris. She gave inner depth to all that exists, shaping the unseen essence within the scene. It represents everything spiritual. One of the 4 main paths, created by the god Ignivar. He sparked the first motion within creation, awakening both flesh and soul. It represents every movement. One of the 4 main paths, created by the goddess Nethera. As the counterforce to creation, she began the cycle of decay, undoing form so that renewal may begin. It represents every destruction and rebirth. "Oh, this is interesting," Adyr murmured, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. In his previous life, MMORPGs were a cherished hobby, and he'd expected to select something akin to a class. This, however, genuinely surprised him. For the first time in any of his lives, someone, or something, was asking him to choose his very own path. He decided to take his time, floating there in the sky, carefully considering which path truly resonated with him, which he genuinely desired. As Adyr hovered in silent contemplation, an unexpected phenomenon began to unfold. First, an unfathomable darkness ascended, staining the sky and cloaking the world below. Then came a low, buzzing hum, filling his ears and the surrounding space, like the distant clash of 1,000 instruments converging into a single, alien note. Next, the cracking. He looked up to see the sky itself fracture, a jagged tear splitting open with a bone-deep creak. Adyr's first instinct was to flee, but he swiftly remembered his lack of control. He was merely floating, held by an invisible force. Frozen in anticipation, he watched. From the widening rift, dozens of brilliant lights surged outward, once again inundating the world and sky with a blinding, ethereal glow. As they drew nearer, he recognized them. Letters, radiant, sharp, and pulsating with a presence too vast to fully grasp. The letters drifted downward, arranging themselves above the existing 4 paths, taking their place at the very apex, while the 4 original paths remained beneath, glowing majestically in green. This new one was distinct. It was composed entirely of colorless light, radiating not mere beauty, but something beyond magnificence, something absolute. They longed to exist, and I let them be. And thus the 5th path descended upon the world. Is this some kind of glitch, or part of an opening event? Adyr mused, thoughtfully sifting through the dazzling spectacle, leaning more toward the latter. Whatever. He chuckled, his choice already made. He had yearned to choose his own path freely, unburdened by manipulation or outside influence. But this newly revealed path felt far too special. To ignore it would be nothing short of folly. And so, without further hesitation, he articulated his decision. I choose Primora. The moment he spoke, all existing texts vanished, replaced by new ones flashing before his eyes. Do analyzing character. Dankles character analysis complete. Dankles generating status panel. Dankles status panel created. Dankles des nameses. Dankles nivo enedianus. Udine races human. Dankles dianamanate. Ibun. Revenatum bedihaben. Dionpian ivianate tu venitude. Dine dianagus. Dankles dianadesi tu gusfingles. Dion wesianus feet. Dion wesininis vesi tu gazininisate. Dion wedesit. Dion wedinidu on that date. Dion glenless paintate. Uine wesinidinanit. Dion wedinidianit. Dion wedinitit. Vidianadit. Dion wediniduditit. Viladitit. Return with brutal immediacy. Without warning, Adyr began to plummet, falling from what must have been thousands of meters above the ground. As he accelerated, the air pressure slammed against his body, intensifying with each passing second. The gentle breeze he'd barely noticed had transformed into a violent gale, clawing at his skin and tearing at his clothes. The high-altitude cold bit deep, seeping into his flesh, numbing his hands and face. Breathing became a struggle as the rushing air battered his lungs and his eyes stung from the relentless wind. Fuck. He cursed under his breath, every painful detail of the fall acutely felt. The brutal realism of the experience conjured a chilling thought. If his senses were this real, would dying feel real too? He had died once before, he knew precisely what it felt like, and it was utterly devoid of pleasure. Still, stubbornly, he kept his eyes open. He watched the ground grow larger, rushing up to meet him. Despite the pain, the tension, the chaos, he couldn't help but find enjoyment in it. There was something raw, something breathtakingly beautiful about the fall. And then came the inevitable, the crash. Adyr blinked in confusion. It wasn't the bone-shattering, flesh-bursting impact he'd braced for. Instead, it felt like a mild stumble, no more than tripping and falling onto solid ground. Slowly, he pushed himself up, first checking his body. Finding no visible wounds or signs of injury, he finally turned his attention to his surroundings. He quickly realized he was no longer beneath the bright daytime sky he'd fallen through. Darkness cloaked the area, and he soon noticed the jagged stone walls encircling him. He was inside a cave. "How did I fall here?" he thought, frowning as he looked up, only to find solid rock overhead. No hole, no entrance, no explanation for his arrival. Then another sensation struck him. The smell, a foul mixture of rot, ash, and dampness, clung to the air, thick and oppressive. He glanced down, observing the ground coated in a thin layer of black soil. Faint footprints marred the soil, so sharp and brittle they could only have been left by bare bone, like the steps of skeletons wandering through the darkness. "What is this?" "A skeleton dungeon," Adyr muttered to himself, drawing on his MMORPG experience for an educated guess. At that moment, green text reappeared in his vision, carrying a new message. Jan Talent Recognition. Observer LV1. Jan Talent Van Talent has been identified based on demonstrated behavior. Proceed with registration to the status panel. Cost 1, energy, reward 1, free stat point. Adyr read the system message carefully, processing it before finally saying yes. Immediately, he felt something invisible within him being siphoned away. The sensation was strange but brief, and once it faded, he wondered how to view the changes to his status panel. As if in response to his thoughts, green text appeared before him, revealing the updated panel. Giant named Adyr Giant Race Azia Human, Painth Zia Human, Paith 3 Primora, Giant Evolution Step, Giant 02 Physiques Dian Du Dayon 2 3, Energy Zion Dine over 10, Registered Talents Dian W1 over 5, Sparks Ruse complete your first evolution to unlock, Sanctuary Giant W complete your first evolution to unlock, free stat points Dian W1. He noted that his energy had decreased by 1 point, while both the registered talents and free stat point sections had each increased by 1. So this is how it works. Adyr muttered, a flash of understanding in his eyes. Rather than granting him a new skill or ability, the system had simply recognized a talent he already possessed and rewarded him with a free stat point for demonstrating it. It was evident that the game's power system revolved around players' genuine talents. Before allocating his newly gained free stat point, Adyr noticed the chain LV1 indicator next to the talent and paused, a new thought crossing his mind. He crouched beside one of the skeletal footprints, examining it more closely. The strange blue crystals embedded in the stone walls cast a faint, natural glow. Like pale moonlight, he used this dim illumination to aid his inspection. Short, no taller than a child. Toes turned slightly inward, walks hunched over. Pressures heavier on the right, carrying something, sword or short spear. Weight: 15, maybe 20 kilos, light on its feet, but the bones are solid, not something that'll crumble with a single blow. Logunu detind, Sem's end. As a former human hunter, his tracking and observation skills were exceptional, and after completing his deeper investigation, the system message appeared once again, confirming his suspicions. Yugen Talent Recognition. Observer LV2. Confirmed. Du talent has been identified based on further demonstrated behavior. Proceed with registration to the status panel. Cost: 10. Energy. Reward: 10. Free stat points. Unlike before, the reward wasn't just a single stat point, it was an incredible 10-fold increase. But there was a small problem. I don't have enough energy to register it. Adyr muttered, glancing at his energy bar and wondering how to increase it. He experimented briefly but quickly realized he couldn't allocate his free stat point directly into human energy. At the same time, he wasn't keen on spending it on his other stats either, not before fully understanding what each truly represented. For now, he chose to set the issue aside and focus on exploring the cave around him. With less than 3 hours of battery life remaining on the helmet, he had no intention of wasting it on tedious system analysis. He shifted his attention to a tunnel, the only path leading deeper into the cave, and began moving forward in small, cautious steps. A faint excitement stirred within him at the prospect of meeting his first skeleton victim. Adyr advanced deeper into the confined passage, crystals in the walls casting a faint, guiding light, his eyes meticulously tracing the disturbed dust. With each step, the footprints multiplied, some startlingly fresh, an undeniable signal that his skeletal quarry was near. His premonition proved accurate. At the corridor's terminus, a subtle shadow stained the far wall, hinting at a presence lurking just beyond the left-hand turn. Unsure of a skeleton's sensory capabilities or its potential might, Adyr opted for a strategy of prudence. He deliberately gentled his pace, movements hushed to an almost imperceptible crawl, advancing with silent, calculated care. Reaching the corridor's end, his gaze finally settled on it. The creature he had meticulously tracked, now revealed for the first time. Standing 170 meters himself, Adyr noted its comparatively diminutive stature, barely clearing 140 meters. Its bone structure diverged subtly from a typical human form, a remarkably round skull, a shortened neck that thrust its head forward, and disproportionately elongated limbs. A broken, half-length spear clutched its right hand. Though discolored by age and decay, the bones exuded an unexpected impression of solidity and resilience. A weapon might be prudent, Adyr mused. Against a living foe he could exploit a weakness, ambush from the shadows, or apply a chokehold. But this adversary was naught but bone, its defeat lying solely in its complete destruction. His current attire, however, offered little aid. Pajamas, bare feet, and no implement in sight, not even a suitable rock for a makeshift bludgeon. Wait, I have a weapon, Adyr realized, a faint smile playing on his lips as he conceptualized his inaugural kill in this game world. With utmost stealth, he closed the distance, inching toward the skeleton like a spider preparing its strike. Once within striking range, confirming his presence remained undetected, he surged forward. He seized the skeleton from behind by its ribs, wrenching it backward with every ounce of his might. The sudden assault left the skeletal foe no chance to resist. It reeled, balance lost, and collapsed onto its back with a dry, hollow clatter. Without a moment's pause, Adyr planted a foot firmly on its ribcage, immobilizing it, even as he snatched the fallen, broken spear from the ground. The spear's tip, mirroring its former wielder, was ancient, rusted, and heavily worn. Yet, beneath the obvious corrosion, its metallic core remained surprisingly sturdy, capable of bone-shattering force with a precise strike. Wasting no further time, Adyr raised the spear and plunged its sharpened point directly at the struggling skeleton's skull. The blow landed, but disappointingly, his raw strength proved insufficient. The spear merely etched a visible crack across the bone. Even so, the impact jarred the skeleton, leaving it stunned and immobile for a crucial half-second, ample time for a follow-up. This time, the spear connected with devastating force. The gratifying sound of shattering bone reverberated, immediately succeeded by a cascade of system messages. Chi-En talent recognition. Tracking, LV1. Chi-En Forstein Ponton. Talent has been identified based on following and interpreting environmental traces. Chi-En's talent recognition. Stealth, LV1. Chi-En done traces. Talent has been identified based on silent movement and successful ambush. Chi-En done recognition. Tactics, LV1. Chi-En done tration. Talent has been identified based on strategic engagement and enemy control. Proceed with registration to the status panel. Cost 1 energy per talent, reward 1 free stat point per talent. Adyr verified the skeleton's absolute demise, confirming it was irrevocably broken, before allowing his attention to drift to the burgeoning system notifications. No loot? No experience? He murmured, a distinct note of disappointment coloring his tone. He opted against registering tactics, mindful of his 5-talent limit. Understanding the mechanics of talent progression, he prioritized abilities that would be easiest to advance later. He therefore expended 2-dant energy to register stealth and tracking, experiencing the familiar internal drain of an enigmatic power. Concurrently, 2 free stat points were added to his tally. A moment's consideration led him to allocate 1 free stat point to tuned-in physique. His recent inability to shatter the skeleton's skull with a single strike had highlighted a clear deficiency in strength. Furthermore, physique's implications were self-evident, prompting his decision to upgrade it and personally gauge its impact. The instant the stat increased, a sudden warmth bloomed within him. Muscles, tendons, even internal organs responded with a series of unsettling twitches and spasms. The sensation wasn't painful, merely disquieting, but it swiftly subsided, supplanted by an undeniable newness, a potent surge of strength, almost ethereal in its intensity. He felt every fiber of his being constrict, solidify, imbued with a nascent alien might. Good, too good, he murmured, his voice barely audible, relishing the peculiar, almost addictive flood of power. His physique when CQ3, his resilience CQ3, in ND20 to mist and sim 7/11, his registered talent seen to 3/5, in spark seen to complete your first evolution to unlock, in sanctuary na complete your first evolution to unlock. Free stat points Dr. Adyr called forth his status panel, noting an immediate correlation. A single-point increase in Siegen physique had directly corresponded to an identical rise in his maximum energy. A prior suspicion solidified into near certainty. Juan energy wasn't an independent attribute, but rather an aggregate representation of his combined stats. His gaze returned to the inert skeleton, his hand slowly extending to brush against its coarse, ancient bones. No blood to shed, no flesh to rend, no eyes to fade, only a pile of brittle bone. It seemed almost incredible that this collection of inert parts had animated mere moments earlier. Despite the starkness, a peculiar clarity sharpened Adyr's dark brown eyes. He had to confess, a thrill had run through him. Still, no loot, he sighed, his gaze settling on his meager trophy, a broken spear. Dissatisfied, he opted for a more thorough search of the remains. Deep within the shattered skull, he discovered it. A tiny, faintly glowing purple crystal, fused directly into the bone. Nearly melded with the cranial structure, Adyr carefully leveraged the broken spear's sharp tip to pry it loose. The crystal was minuscule, smaller than his pinky tip, and appeared intrinsically worthless. Yet, an undefinable strangeness clung to it. As he examined it, an odd hunger flickered to life. For an instant, the crystal seemed impossibly delicious, compelling in a way he couldn't rationalize. Intrigued by the bizarre impulse, he paused only a moment before raising the crystal to his lips, driven by a desire to taste. It bore no flavor. But the moment his tongue met its surface, the hunger sharpened, his stomach responding with a faint rumble. What's the worst that could happen? It's just a game, after all. Adyr muttered to himself, a casual shrug accompanying the thought. Dispensing with further deliberation, he popped the crystal into his mouth. He attempted to chew, but its hardness resisted. Before he could consciously intervene, an instinctive swallow reflex took over, sending the crystal sliding down his throat. He waited, momentarily expectant. Then, it struck him. A sudden rush of energy inundated his body, a sensation eerily familiar, yet precisely inverse to the drain he felt when registering talents. Before, it had been extracted. Now, it infused him, replenishing rather than diminishing. Before he could fully assimilate the experience, a familiar green system message materialized. You have consumed an energy crystal, LV1. Your energy has increased by 0.1.1. Shagen energy 7/11 1/11. Just like that, Adyr had unearthed a method to restore his energy. The game had already surpassed Adyr's wildest imaginings. Its underlying technology was unparalleled. Every sensation felt so real, almost indistinguishable from actual reality. Yet, it was the raw thrill of discovery that captivated him most, akin to a child experiencing the world anew. Collect purple crystals. Important, he mentally filed away, adding a new reminder to his internal memory palace. With this insight, he pressed on through the cavern's dim passages. Soon after, another skeleton crossed his path. This time, confident in their dull senses and sluggish movements, Adyr forwent stealth. Instead, he charged, spear gripped firmly. The creature registered his approach, but before its broken rusted sword could even rise, Adyr's spear plunged through its skull, shattering it and felling the monster instantly. The elevated physique stat manifested an immediate, undeniable impact. No system message followed. The system, it seemed, found nothing worthy of new talent recognition, but Adyr wasn't concerned. He still harbored numerous unrevealed talents should the need arise. As before, he began to search the remains. The broken sword, in even poorer condition than his own spear, was disregarded. Discovering nothing else of value, he swiftly located the purple crystal, again nestled within the skull. You have consumed an energy crystal LV1. Your energy has increased by 0. 1. Your energy has increased by 0. 1 over 11 7. 2 over 11, imbued with the familiar energetic surge. Adyr consulted his status panel. He calculated that, at this rate, he would require another 28 skeletons to amass sufficient energy for a level 2 talent. The cave's immensity, coupled with his helmet's steadily depleting battery, gave him pause. He refused to rush headlong into the unknown. Stronger creatures or hidden traps could easily lie deeper within. Caution and meticulous preparation were cornerstones of his philosophy. Adyr maintained a deliberate pace, traversing the decaying corridors for what felt like close to 2 hours. Guided by his heightened senses, he moved with circumspection, dispatching every skeleton encountered with swift, efficient strikes. Whether by fortune or ill luck, he encountered no traps, no stronger foes, nor even a different species of creature throughout that entire period. Only the same repetitive goblin-esque skeletons presented themselves. As the ceaseless repetition, the relentless slaughter of the already deceased began to dull his mind, he finally paused to check his energy reserves. Energy minus 9 over 11. He had accounted for 27 additional skeletons, leaving him just 1 kill short of the 10. Energy required for his next talent advancement. In pursuit of his next target, Adyr entered a much broader corridor. This passage diverged sharply from the rough-hewn stone paths he'd navigated until now, unmistakably bearing the mark of intelligent design. Along either side of the hall, rows of small, iron-barred cells receded into the gloom. Adyr quickly deduced he had stumbled upon a prison block. His steps were deliberate, propelled by a blend of curiosity and circumspection, as he peered into each cell in turn. Most lay vacant, save for layers of grime and heavy spiderwebs. Some cell doors remained locked, while others sagged open. Just as Adyr began to assume this was merely an abandoned, forgotten subterranean prison, something caught his eye. Within one of the locked cells, curled into a tight ball on the grimy floor, lay a small figure. It was a young girl, delicate and slender, clad in what had once been a beautiful white garment, now ripped, soiled, and stained. Her long, tangled blonde hair fanned out across the dusty flagstones, her back to him, knees drawn protectively to her chest in a fetal crouch. Careful observation revealed the faint, rhythmic rise and fall of her shoulders. She was alive. A prisoner? Adyr mused, though the notion felt incongruous. This locale hardly resembled a functional prison. It was ancient, deserted, and populated solely by mindless skeletons, creatures barely capable of locomotion, let alone systematic detainment. Consequently, Adyr decided against haste. Rather than risk a sound that might alarm the girl, or any other lurking presence, he remained silent, intent on gleaning maximum information before intervention. Fresh footprints, originating from the far end of the corridor. Small, light, hers, hasty, panicked, fleeing something or someone. The gait uneven, marked by faltering pauses, not tactical, but born of sheer exhaustion. Her legs failed her repeatedly. She fell, yet each time dragged herself upright. Her final steps, a desperate stagger, barely sustained. She tumbled into the cell, wrenching the door shut, an act of pure, unthinking desperation. No strategy, no plan, only the raw imperative of survival. Adyr halted before the sealed cell, his hand coming to rest lightly on its rusted bars. The door hadn't merely closed, it had locked, or perhaps simply rusted itself shut. 2 days, perhaps 3. No food, no escape. Waiting. Fading. "Hey," Adyr murmured softly, observing the subtle tremor that rippled through her shoulders at the sound of his voice. Slowly she stirred, pushing herself laboriously upright. Her head turned, wide eyes meeting his gaze, brimming with fear, confusion, and a burgeoning flicker of hope. She wasn't the sole recipient of surprise. The instant Adyr clearly saw her face, a jolt of shock ran through him. This was no mere girl, as he had initially presumed. Her features were more delicate, indicative of a young woman, likely in her 20s, and she was not entirely human. Her ears were subtly elongated, tapering to fine points, her nose small and refined, and her large ice-blue eyes imbued her with the fragile, ethereal appearance of a porcelain doll. She parted her lips to speak, then closed them as if the very act of forming words had escaped her. Adyr remained silent, patient and unmoving. Her lips quivered. She attempted again. "You!" She finally managed, her voice a fragile whisper. "You look tall." Another shock ran through Adyr, yet it wasn't her sweet voice or the odd choice of words that caused it. It was the language itself. A tongue, to Adyr's knowledge, entirely absent from the history of the world he now inhabited. Latin, how? A profound internal conflict stirred within Adyr. The 12 cities recognized but a single tongue, utterly dissimilar to Latin. Moreover, none of the countless history lectures he'd endured at university had ever hinted at a language even remotely akin to those from his former life. True, this world boasted innumerable languages, dialects and accents, yet each had been entirely foreign to him, utterly devoid of any resemblance to the speech he'd once commanded. Could it be mere coincidence that a newly fabricated game language somehow manifested as Latin? The notion defied credulity. As Adyr's mind raced, the girl, seemingly aware of her awkward phrasing, quickly spoke anew. Sorry," she offered, attempting to dispel any confusion. A beat later, she added, "May I ask? Who are you?" With each subsequent word, Adyr's conviction hardened. She spoke Latin. "Adyr. A player," he responded, matching her language. Latin was one of many languages he had mastered in his past life, a fluency he now found himself possessing. His previous profession had necessitated travel through countless nations, shedding identities with the ease of changing attire. One such guise, demanding integration into a highly specific milieu, had compelled him to learn Latin, gen talent recognition. Linguistic LV1 present. Confirmed Adyr talent has been identified based on fluent adaptation to foreign speech. Proceed with registration to the status panel. Reward 1 free stat point. Adyr registered the talent recognition, but chose to defer its registration, prioritizing the energy reserve needed to upgrade Observer to level 2. "Player?" the girl echoed, head tilted in confusion, a flicker of worry across her face. The word clearly held no meaning for her, leaving her uncertain if this player Was friend or foe? Her reaction was precisely what Adyr had expected. He had introduced himself as such purely out of curiosity, eager to observe an NPC's response to the term. Player. Dismissing her confusion and unanswered question, he knelt, reducing his imposing height to meet her gaze. Then, with an air of casual ease, he posed his own query. "Your name?" he asked, his tone light, engineered to subtly alleviate her tension and propel the exchange. The girl held his gaze for a long second, then consciously straightened. She shifted onto her knees, adjusting her posture as if to shed the air of haggard shame before finally speaking. "It's Vesha," she stated, a brief hesitation preceding a now steadier continuation. "Vesha Draven, citizen of the Valari Kingdom, youngest daughter of Lord Orvan Draven, follower of Astra, and believer in the god Astraeus." Adyr's eyebrow lifted in faint amusement. She had volunteered an abundance of detail, not from naivete, but from shrewd calculation. Her predicament was clear to her, a solitary, vulnerable individual confined within a crumbling prison. By disclosing her lineage and status, she wasn't merely responding, she was strategically presenting herself, aiming to be deemed valuable, not disposable. A rather subtle maneuver, especially for an artificial intelligence. Without further preamble, she laid bare her true objective. "Can you help me escape? My father will ensure you are handsomely rewarded." "It's locked," Adyr observed, indicating the cell door with a brief gesture. "You're tall," the girl quickly appended, then clarified, "taller even than the kingdom's royal guards. You must be strong." Her reasoning elicited a quiet chuckle from Adyr. He had just gleaned another valuable piece of information. It became clear that Vesha was not entirely human. Her race likely possessed a shorter average stature, leading her to mistakenly categorize him as one of her kin. "Why are you here?" Adyr questioned, once more sidestepping her direct plea. A momentary flicker of disappointment marred her eyes, but she swiftly veiled it. "I sought the spark." "Spark?" He briefly checked his status panel, noting a section marked "Sparks." Unwilling to betray his ignorance or appear stranger than he already seemed, he refrained from direct inquiry. "And did you find it?" he asked instead. Vesha hesitated, briefly wondering if he mocked her, but answered courteously nonetheless. "The 6 guards who escorted me perished helping me flee a skeleton ambush. I never even saw the spark." Her eyes reddened and glistened as she spoke, guilt shadowing her features. But she considered herself strong, and she valiantly held back the gathering tears. "I see," Adyr replied, feigning empathy while carefully formulating his next question. But before he could press for more information, a sound reverberated from the corridor's far end. "They're here," Vesha blurted, panic flaring in her eyes. The creatures that had brought her to this ruined state had finally caught up. Paralyzed by fear, her gaze fixed on the tall man, her sole lifeline. She watched him slowly uncoil to his full stature, once again captivated by his imposing height. Then, a detail she had previously missed struck her. The man wore peculiar, unfashionable clothes of flimsy material, utterly unsuitable for defense. Worse, he was barefoot and armed with only a broken, rusted spear. "I'm going to die here." The stark reality slammed into her. Even if he somehow opened the cell, then what? They would still be trapped within the dungeon's depths. He was tall, yes, perhaps strong enough for 1 or 2 skeletons, but these halls teemed with them. The delicate sprout of hope that had briefly taken root withered as she watched him calmly advance towards the approaching skeleton. She waited tense as the sharp clash of weaponry and the crack of bone reverberated down the passage, followed by an abrupt silence. Relief washed over her. It had been but a single skeleton, dispatched with apparent ease. Yet, this changed nothing. One dead skeleton would not deter the inevitable. More would arrive, sooner or later, as she sat, allowing despair to once again claim her. His footsteps approached, then his voice. "Stay back." Puzzled, she looked up, watching him pop a small purple crystal into his mouth. "What? What are you doing?" She gasped, aghast, as if he had utterly lost his senses. Adyr registered her sharp exclamation, silently filing away her apparent familiarity with energy crystals, but chose to address it later. He merely repeated, "Back." This was no longer a request, but an order delivered with an understated authority that permitted no dissent. Instinctively, Vesha tapped into a reserve of strength she hadn't known she possessed. She scrambled backward, pressing herself against the cell wall, maximizing the distance between herself and the iron bars. Meanwhile, Adyr focused on his character panel, reviewing previous logs to locate the COG Observer LV2 DUA talent registration. Chai quality recognition. Observer LV2 CHIO. Confirmed DUA talent has been identified based on further demonstrated behavior. Proceed with registration to the status panel. Cost 10 energy. Reward 10 free stat points. He confirmed the registration, immediately experiencing the familiar draining sensation as his energy reserves diminished. With 12 free stat points now available, he allocated 7 to his physique attribute. "This should be enough to breach the cell door now," he mused, a surge of raw power thrumming through every fiber of his being. The name echoed in Vesha's mind, a repeated mantra, as if she wrestled with a half-forgotten memory. Initially, she'd dismissed him as yet another fortune seeker, drawn to the cave by the allure of swift wealth, the kind who'd trade loyalty for coin. Yet, understanding the inherent cunning and skill of adventurers, a fragile hope had ignited within her. Perhaps he possessed the key to the cell gate, or even a hidden path out of this labyrinthine prison. In her dire predicament, these were her sole, desperate aspirations. Then she saw it, a shimmering purple crystal. He swallowed it with unsettling nonchalance, as if it were mere confection. Her shock intensified when he showed no ill effects, not even a tremor, to consume such a potent energy source and emerge unscathed. Only one explanation presented itself. He was a practitioner. The truth slammed into her with the force of lightning. Her heart hammered, her head spun, and for an instant, her world narrowed to a swirling void, everything blurring except for his solitary figure. He stood before the cell door, face impassive, an unmoving sentinel, waiting, calculating. Then, a blur of motion too swift for Vesha's eyes to track, and his foot connected with the door. A brutal, explosive sound ripped through the cell, stirring ancient dust into billows. The very room shuddered, dislodging chunks of stone from the time-worn walls. Startled, Vesha instinctively squeezed her eyes shut. When she reopened them, the door remained, but its defiance was marred. The frame encircling the lock was now deeply dented, almost pulverized. A second kick, even more devastating than the first, sent a shower of rust and dust cascading down, forcing Vesha to shield her face as her heart thrummed against her ribs. Then came a third, final impact, followed by a heavy, groaning metallic screech as the door at last yielded, collapsing inward. Curled against the wall, Vesha's small frame trembled, but this time it was not from fear, it was exhilaration. More than the sudden hope of escaping this dungeon with him by her side, it was the staggering revelation that she stood before a legend, one of those mythical figures she'd only ever glimpsed a few times despite her standing, or read about in ancient tomes. Slowly she lowered her hands, forcing her eyes open to finally behold the heroic figure. But reality proved a cruel inverse of her imagination. Adyr lay face down before the prison gate, utterly motionless. "Are you okay?" she stammered, her voice wavering as she crawled towards him. He offered no reply, utterly still. As a fresh wave of panic seized her, a new sound echoed from the corridor's depths, the ominous rattle of bones, drawing nearer. The commotion had summoned the skeletons. In his dim, candlelit room, Adyr slowly pushed himself up from the bed, removing the game helmet. Its charge indicator pulsed a faint, ominous red. 0%. He had breached the cell door in the nick of time. Will she survive? Adyr mused, his optimism low. The racket he'd caused would surely draw the skeletons, and with Vesha's fragile body and dwindling strength, her odds of survival were painfully slim. His actions, however, stemmed from a selfish curiosity, a desire to observe an NPC and artificial intelligence under such duress. He aimed to decipher its decision-making mechanisms, a potentially invaluable insight for future interactions. Yet, he had critically overlooked one crucial detail: his own body, prone and defenseless. Oblivious to his vulnerability, Adyr rose, checking his watch. 7:01 p.m. He located the charging cable and connected it to the helmet, leaving it in silent anticipation of the power's return. Finding himself with time to spare, Adyr prepared for his daily muscle training. Thou nand sword. Just as he was about to begin, a knock sounded at the door. Assuming it was Neva, he reached for the doorknob. With a sharp crack, the knob snapped off in his hand. What the hell? Brother, what was that? Neva asked, stepping inside, her brow furrowed with curiosity and confusion at the noise. Just the doorknob. Adyr answered swiftly, concealing his astonishment. Old and loose, it just came off when I pulled, he added. Oh, okay, Neva responded, then continued, I need to borrow your laptop. It's fully charged, isn't it? Adyr nodded, gesturing to the table. If you're not busy, come downstairs and help me study. Mom's home too, she added, departing. Adyr simply nodded once more, closing the door and still fixating on the broken handle clutched in his hand. It hadn't been loose, despite his quick fabrication. Old, yes, but not so decrepit as to shatter under ordinary pressure. Don't tell me. The preposterous notion struck him, and he hastily tossed the knob onto the table, dropping to the floor to commence his workout. Abandoning his usual stretches and warm-ups, he plunged directly into heavy sets. He dropped into a push-up position. Since age 6, Adyr had rigorously trained with bodyweight exercises, effortlessly completing around 100 push-ups in a single set on an ordinary day. Today, however, was markedly different. From the first repetition, he registered an unprecedented ease. By the 100th push-up, his muscles showed no hint of fatigue. He transitioned to one-arm push-ups, completing another 100 with minimal exertion, only a faint warmth stirring within his limbs. Both surprised and intrigued, Adyr tripled his customary workout. He proceeded from push-ups to intense core exercises like crunches, then to lower body work with squats, and finally, back and balance drills such as reverse planks. Upon completing his entire regimen, he wasn't even perspiring, not a single drop. He estimated his physical strength had multiplied at least 6-fold. This only solidified the outrageous thought that had begun to take root earlier. My body truly is stronger. Victor was right, Adyr murmured to himself. Such a sudden, miraculous surge in strength could only be attributed to a genetic mutation, and the sole catalyst, it seemed, was the game. What he struggled to comprehend was the how. He'd always presumed the game's greatest offering would be information, specifically the knowledge to synthesize a genetic mutation serum. He'd never conceived that a helmet, engineered merely to interface with brain frequencies, could influence something as profoundly physical and inherent as his genes. Genetic mutation typically demanded direct intervention, an injection, for instance, and, to his understanding, brainwave manipulation alone couldn't reshape DNA. A fresh, absurd theory began to blossom. The game wasn't simply a technological marvel, it was beginning to feel like a fantastical creation, the elaborate work of a mad genius. Before the bathroom mirror, Adyr's gaze immediately snagged on the absence of his lip scar. A fresh bruise, sustained only 3 hours prior, had vanished entirely. His pale skin, too, seemed transformed. It now possessed a healthy luster, smooth and clear, as if he adhered to a meticulous daily skincare regimen. Intrigued, he flexed in the single candle light. His physique had always been lean, wiry. Now his muscles appeared notably fuller, his abs and obliques especially sharp and defined, like chiseled marble. In just 3 hours he had achieved more physical enhancement than most could hope for in a lifetime, a caliber of transformation typically reserved for the affluent and well-connected. For a fleeting moment, he contemplated donning the second game helmet, the one Selena had sent, to dive back into the virtual world for another 3 hours. Yet, he understood the system's restrictions. Only one active connection per player, and no means to forge a second avatar. With no other recourse but to await the return of power, he descended the stairs. From the couch, Marielle greeted him as he reached the bottom of the stairs, her arm waving languidly in his direction, too weary to rise. "Son, how was your day?" Her black hair and sharp blue eyes offered undeniable proof. No DNA test was needed to confirm her as Neva's biological mother. "Exceptionally fruitful," Adyr replied, a faint smile playing on his lips as he navigated to the dining table, cluttered with textbooks and softly illuminated by candlelight. He settled beside Neva. "Is that so? I heard you received a rather expensive gift today. From Victor, perhaps?" Marielle's voice echoed, still weary, but now tinged with playful sarcasm. She was well aware of her son's close bond with Victor Bates and intimately familiar with Victor's identity. Adyr glanced at Neva, who offered a subtle shrug without lifting her gaze. He chuckled. "Yes, a game helmet for the new release. Care to try? I have a spare. The spare is from Selena White, just so you know." Neva interjected flatly, her eyes unwavering from her textbook. "Selena White." Marielle paused, then offered a smirk and a thumbs up. "I'm proud of you, boy. Cultivating friendships with influential people is the soundest investment in your future." She understood this axiom better than most. A graduate of the same university, she knew that for individuals like them, a mere degree held little sway. Her current position owed its existence entirely to the connections she'd forged, recognizing that influence, not education, truly unlocked opportunities. "Besides, I'm too busy and too old for games," she added, her tired eyes drifting shut. "Okay," Adyr replied, letting the matter drop. He refrained from revealing that it was no mere game, but a potential catalyst for genetic mutation. This wasn't solely due to his promise to Victor, but stemmed from his own incomplete grasp of its enigmatic nature. The game was shrouded in too many unanswered questions, and he harbored a profound skepticism regarding its ultimate intentions. He had no desire for his loved ones to engage with anything so profoundly suspicious. "Marielle, have you ever heard of a language called Latin?" he inquired, hoping to illuminate the persistent question in his mind. "Latin? No, I can't say I have. Is it an ancient tongue or something?" She responded, her eyes still closed. His sister's blank expression confirmed her equal ignorance. "I suppose so," Adyr murmured. He briefly considered consulting one of his history professors the following day, when abruptly the landline phone mounted on the wall began to ring. For a moment, a profound stillness gripped them all. Marielle's eyes flew open, wide with concern, her face etched with worry and fear. During power outages, landlines typically died. A ringing phone at this moment could only signify one thing: an emergency line. The children. Marielle gasped, shedding her exhaustion in an instant as she surged towards the phone. Her mind immediately leaped to the orphanage where she served as assistant manager. Only an emergency call from there could explain this. A wave of fear for the children enveloped her. "Hello," she answered sharply, urgency lacing her tone. Adyr observed her keenly as her expression metamorphosed while she listened. The initial panic and dread dissolved, replaced by irritation, then a flicker of anger before settling back into her earlier weariness. She sighed, then turned to Adyr, stating flatly, "It's Victor." As he rose to take the receiver, Marielle sank back onto the couch, her features softening with palpable relief. "Victor?" Adyr questioned, raising the handset to his ear. Victor had never called this late, and Adyr instinctively knew it concerned the game. "Adyr, did the helmet I sent arrive?" Victor's voice came through, laced with curiosity. "So, have you played it yet?" This time, a thread of tension, almost worry, was discernible. A brief silence stretched. "Tell me you didn't die in there." He pressed, his anxiety now unmistakable. "No, I didn't. Why?" Adyr countered, his own curiosity piqued. "Hell yeah! I knew it! You're among the 1%. Victor's tone transformed instantly, all apprehension vanishing, replaced by almost childlike elation. 1%? What does that even mean? Haven't you checked the internet? "It's all over the forums," Victor exclaimed, clearly surprised by the question. "Victor, we're in a blackout. There's no internet right now." Adyr explained, stifling an internal sigh. Of course, Victor would overlook something so obvious. "Oh, right. That's why I had to bribe the central station just to connect through the emergency line," Victor muttered, a sudden realization dawning on him. "Anyway, you'll see once power returns. I called simply to inform you, you possess only one life in the game. Die, and it's permanently over. No second chances." A brief pause, then his tone deepened, becoming more grave, more deliberate. "There's something else I need to relay, but not over the phone. Meet me early tomorrow at the library. I must go now." He spoke with urgency, and before Adyr could interject, Victor added a final caveat. One more thing, exercise caution when logging out. Your avatar remains unconscious in-game. Leave it in an unsafe location and it can still be killed. Secure a safe spot before you exit. Bye." The line went dead, leaving Adyr staring at the silent phone, stunned. "I miscalculated," Adyr thought, the bitter taste of his error sharp on his tongue. The mission, intended purely to gauge the NPC's nature, had spectacularly backfired. Now, knowing his real body lay defenseless, vulnerable to a horde of approaching skeletons, he understood he'd ceded control to chance. This lack of agency gnawed at him. "Or have I?" He chuckled softly as he replaced the receiver and turned back to the table. Observing that Adyr had concluded his call, Marielle considered asking about the urgency that compelled Victor to use an emergency line, but she demurred. She wasn't a parent who pried into her children's private affairs, and she knew firsthand the recklessness of youth. She let it pass. Soon her weary eyes succumbed, and in the soft glow of the candlelight, lulled by the quiet murmur of her children studying, she drifted into a serene, peaceful sleep. As morning light filtered through the window, Adyr slowly opened his eyes and sat upright in bed. His gaze sought the wristwatch on his desk. 6:00 a.m. His first action was to verify the power's return. Indeed, the game helmet's indicator light glowed, signaling it had commenced charging. The manual stipulated a full charge required precisely 3 hours, matching the duration of a single in-game session. It also prohibited play while charging, and though Adyr briefly puzzled over the lack of fast charging for such advanced technology, there was nothing to be done. With no need for haste, he spent a few minutes by the window, observing the sunrise. A light stretch followed, then his customary morning routine in the bathroom before he descended the stairs. The house was still, no one else had yet stirred. He brewed a cup of coffee in the kitchen, then set the table and prepared a simple breakfast for his family. Afterwards, he returned to his room and opened his laptop. Upon logging into the most popular local social media platform, Adyr found it unsurprising that the game was the top trending topic across Shelter City 9. His network access was confined to the city limits. The internet was strictly local, but he suspected the situation was similar in other cities. A quick scan of the top posts revealed a striking observation. Over 99% of the comments were overwhelmingly negative. Universally, users lauded its unparalleled realism and full-dive immersion, hailing it as technology decades beyond its era. Yet, as a game, most found it profoundly disappointing, even infuriating. The predominant grievance? A multitude of players perished immediately after spawning, denied even the chance to act. Adyr clicked on a highly viewed post. "Adyr apocalypse survivor man. Are the devs deliberately messing with us?" I chose my path, then instantly plummeted from the sky into an active volcano. Died before I could even move. The worst part, the pain felt real. I can still taste the burning. I want my money back. No, I demand compensation for the psychological trauma. This was merely one of hundreds of identical laments below. What wallet breaker? Dude, count yourself fortunate. At least your death was swift. I spawned in a dark forest. 5 minutes later, a pack of wolves tore me limb from limb. Slowly, I couldn't even log out. I was forced to endure my own dismemberment. Not peace. Pieces. Pieces. Naturally, a few trolls peppered the comments. With Granny Mage. Hee hee, you pathetic losers couldn't even last 2 seconds. I floated in the middle of the ocean for exactly 30 minutes before a shark got me. Clearly, I'm part of the top 10%. E-made. As Adyr continued reading, it finally clicked. This was Victor's 1%. Players, it seemed, had transmuted their collective trauma and frustration into an impromptu ranking system. They humorously gauged survival time as a badge of honor, jokingly assigning percentile brackets based on longevity. Those, like Adyr, who had survived without dying, were now designated the top 1%. Further perusal revealed several intriguing details. All players, it appeared, underwent an identical initial sequence, selecting one of 4 celestial paths. Yet, there was no mention whatsoever of a 5th. Another anomaly concerned the stat system. Each player seemed to acquire only a single stat, directly linked to their chosen path. For instance, Astra adherents gained physique, while Nether selectors received resilience. This starkly contrasted with Adyr's unique circumstance. His character panel displayed all 4 stats, a clear indication that his chosen path was fundamentally distinct. Perhaps the most captivating detail, however, was the utter absence of real-world physical changes in any discussion. No one spoke of gaining strength from in-game stats, nor of experiencing mutations akin to Adyr's. 2 possibilities existed. Either he was alone in this transformation, or others were deliberately silent. Adyr felt a powerful conviction that it was the latter. Having gleaned all the available information, Adyr closed his laptop. Noticing the campus shuttle would arrive in 15 minutes, he quickly changed into his uniform, packed his notes and textbooks into a leather satchel, and retrieved the box containing Selena's game helmet before descending the stairs. "Good morning, son. Heading out?" Marielle, his mother, greeted him from the breakfast table, where she and Neva were already seated and eating. "Yeah. Are you staying home today?" Adyr inquired, lacing his shoes. Marielle sipped her tea, then sighed deeply before replying. "I wish. A new group of children arrives today. I'll likely be home late again." Her voice bore weariness, but her eyes belied it, sparkling with a quiet joy. She never voiced complaint when it came to the orphanage. The more children they salvaged from the outside chaos, the greater peace she seemed to find within herself. He bade Marielle and Neva farewell, then stepped outside. The sky, typically obscured by dense yellow clouds, felt lighter today. Sunlight, in hesitant rays, pierced the thinning veil, bathing the scarred earth below in unexpected warmth and illumination. It was still an apocalyptic morning, like countless others, yet an indefinable quality in the air hinted at renewal, as if the very world held its breath for a fresh genesis. Adyr barely waited for the shuttle's arrival before securing the first empty seat. Inside, the familiar faces mirrored a universal weariness, hollow-strained, eroded by the silent dread of an uncertain tomorrow. Adyr understood that beneath every still facade, a cacophony of unspoken history resided. He watched, always watched. A restless finger tap, a faint smudge on a collar, a gaze lingering a fraction too long, each minutia spoke volumes. In less than a year, he had meticulously pieced together their inner lives from these minuscule tells, breakfast rituals, preferred hues, secret anxieties never voiced aloud. To others, they were merely fellow students. To him, they were open, bleeding case files, awaiting his scrutiny. His observation wasn't simply a habit, it was an instinct, an insatiable itch in his mind he never sought to scratch. Among these carefully catalogued individuals, one person held a particularly cherished place in Adyr's quiet routine, much like a beloved book he'd revisit with a mug of coffee on a rainy day. His name was Aaron, standing at 2.05 meters, with the formidable physique of a seasoned bodybuilder, he dwarfed the others. A single glance conveyed immense, untamed strength, prompting Adyr to wonder if mutant genes flowed through him and just how much more powerful he could become. Aaron's black hair was cropped so short it appeared as a mere shadow clinging to his scalp. His dark green eyes, sharp and frigid, perfectly complemented the hard, unforgiving lines of his face. He was the type of man instinctively avoided, someone you'd cross the street to bypass. Even the typically arrogant mutant students, born into wealth and power, often thought twice before testing his patience. Yet, only Adyr perceived the hidden depths beneath that imposing exterior, the hushed grief, the profound solitude, and the tragedy that had sculpted him into his current form. As Adyr savored the morning's quiet, the shuttle gradually decelerated, pulling into the campus terminal, its final stop. Without haste, Adyr disembarked when his turn came, striding briskly across campus. But instead of proceeding to the library, where he was scheduled to meet Victor, he veered towards the cargo building. Like all structures on campus, the cargo facility was immense. Its architecture evoked an ancient Roman grandeur, monumental, imposing, and proud. Above its majestic entrance, emblazoned in bold gold and deep blue lettering, was a name that commanded attention: Ravencourt Logistics. It was the sole privately run cargo company still operating across the 12 cities, a name that was not merely a corporate title, but the surname of one of the most potent and venerable families remaining in the world. Stepping inside, Adyr heard the massive glass door hiss shut behind him. He removed his mask and glasses, then passed through a second doorway, inhaling the filtered, purified air. The early hour meant the lobby was uncrowded. He approached a digital kiosk, took a number, and before he could even settle into a seat, a soft chime announced his turn, his number flashing above an open booth. He moved swiftly to the counter. "I wish to send this cargo," he stated through the thick glass. The staff member looked up politely. "Good morning, sir. Is this a local delivery or for another city?" "Local," Adyr responded, sliding the box through the small opening beneath the booth. He then presented his student ID and completed the recipient's address on the form the clerk provided. "That will be 45 credits, sir," the clerk announced once all details were finalized. For a fleeting instant, a sharp pang tightened Adyr's chest, though he betrayed no outward sign. 45 credits for a simple local delivery, nearly half of his monthly scholarship. Without a word, he lifted his wristwatch to the scanner. A soft beep confirmed the payment, and he collected the printed receipt before turning to depart. His next destination was the library, the university's largest building, dominating the campus grounds. Its architecture, in stark contrast to the cargo facility, was distinctly modern. The entire front facade consisted of glass, opaque from the outside, yet offering a clear, panoramic vista to those within. Adyr navigated the same two-door procedure, again shedding his glasses and mask, and entered. The interior stretched expansively. After traversing the main hall, he took the elevator to the 7th floor, arriving at the enclosed terrace. Several tables were spread out, already occupied by small groups of students chatting quietly. This was one of the library's most sought-after locations, a popular gathering spot for those seeking both quietude and company. Adyr turned as Victor approached with long, confident strides. His blonde ponytail swayed subtly with each step, and his characteristic smug expression was fixed beneath his half-lidded, light brown eyes. Adyr didn't speak immediately. He simply stepped forward. Their shoulders met in a firm, practiced bump, a ritual seamlessly performed between old friends. "Yo, Victor." Adyr greeted, a faint curve to his lips. "Always late," Victor retorted with a smirk, already heading towards an empty table as if it were his own. He then paused, reconsidering. "You know what? Let's get a private room." Clearly, whatever he intended to discuss was not meant for casual observation or eavesdropping. Adyr offered no argument, simply following. They ascended to the 6th floor, where private study rooms were reserved. Victor chose one without hesitation, scanning the digital panel beside the door with his watch, an extravagant piece adorned with polished stones, to rent the room for 100 credits an hour. The door unlocked with a soft beep, and they stepped inside. The room was generously proportioned, easily dwarfing Adyr's bedroom at home. Heavy black curtains shrouded the tall window, which would otherwise have offered a clear view of the campus below. In the center stood a spacious desk, flanked by 3 high-end laptops, and off to the side, a neatly made bed hinted at students pulling all-nighters. Victor wasted no time on pleasantries. He settled into a comfortable-looking chair and launched straight into it. "So how long did you play the game?" Adyr pulled out the chair opposite him and sat down. 3 hours, until the device died. "Completely drained the battery?" Victor asked, eyebrows rising in surprise. "I hope you logged out somewhere safe." "I'll be fine," Adyr replied with assurance. Though not entirely certain, a deep conviction told him the chaotic situation he'd left behind might still offer a path to escape. "Good," Victor said, visibly relieved and fully convinced. His eyes then sharpened with curiosity. "So, did you notice the game's, shall we say, truly unique feature? Beyond the hyper-realistic visuals and sensations, I mean." Adyr understood instantly. Without a word, he picked up a solid-looking metal pen from the desk and snapped it in half with his thumb, cleanly, effortlessly. "Yeah," he confirmed, "I discovered the gene mutation mechanic." Victor's eyes widened, his brown irises gleaming with excitement. He let out a short laugh. "Ha, of course you did. You're truly among the top 0.5%. Top 0.5, Adyr questioned, raising an eyebrow. "Wasn't it 1%? That was last night. The number's already dropped," Victor replied with a smirk. "I'm sure more players are dying even as we speak." Victor shifted into a more relaxed position. "And even fewer have grasped what you did, that increasing your stats actually alters your real body." Adyr fell silent for a moment before asking, "It's insane. What kind of game can physically change you just by playing it?" Victor shrugged. "I don't know. Even my father was shocked when he found out yesterday." "Even your father?" Adyr echoed, unable to hide his surprise. "Yeah, and he said not even the 12 city lords fully comprehend what this game truly is." Victor paused, then added, "He said it felt like something touched by alien hands." A tense silence descended upon the room before Victor spoke again, his voice dropping to a lower, more serious register. "Look, Adyr, I admit I'm the one who pulled you into this game, but I had no idea how profound it was, or how genuinely dangerous. You're not just my best friend, you saved my life once, and I brought you in because I wanted you to have a real shot at what this world could offer." He paused, taking a breath, then continued. "But that's not why I asked you here today. You need to grasp the full picture now. This isn't merely a game, it's something far grander. And the risks? They're absolutely real." His words carried the same weight as his tone, unsoftened. He needed Adyr to truly comprehend the gravity of the situation. There was another layer to his insistence. He knew Adyr too well. Adyr was the type to go to great lengths for others, yet never seek help himself. Should anything go wrong, he would silently bear the burden alone. This was precisely what frustrated Victor. The notion of Adyr facing a serious challenge in isolation, without reaching out, was something Victor absolutely refused to permit. "I understand, don't worry," Adyr said with a light chuckle, playing his part flawlessly, "and you know better than anyone, I thrive on risks." Yeah, I know, Victor replied, exhaling deeply. That's exactly why I'm being this serious. For a moment, his mind drifted back to that night, staring down the barrel of a gun, his life hanging by a thread, and the figure who had appeared from nowhere, risking everything to save him. My father is establishing a new division outside the STF Superhuman Task Force. Victor stated calmly. He plans to recruit third-generation mutants for it. Third-generation mutants, Adyr repeated, an eyebrow raised. As far as he knew, there were only two categories. First-generation, natural-born mutants who had lived outside the cities, exposed to extreme radiation, their altered genes passed down through generations, and second-generation, engineered mutants developed under strict clinical supervision, usually commissioned by the wealthy and powerful within the cities, a group to which Victor and other affluent students belonged. Is he planning to recruit surviving players? Adyr ventured a wild guess. Victor nodded. The facility will be ready in a few days. The government is pouring money into it, no expense spared. I'm considering joining the division myself, and I want you to be part of it too. He paused briefly, then quickly added to prevent any misunderstanding. Don't worry, it's nothing that will tie you down. I promise, on my father's name, there won't be any assignments that go against your principles. This is strictly for your benefit. He leaned forward slightly, his tone now more focused. From what I've seen in the initial plans, the facility offers far more than an average player needs. It'll be a hub for information exchange about the game, perhaps even deeper things. And most importantly, they're planning to grant official status to players who join. Victor's eyes met his. In other words, if you accept, you'll have the chance to earn a surname. Adyr fell into deep thought. The offer was undeniably intriguing, especially the prospect of earning a surname. While he had never been particularly fixated on possessing one, the advantages that accompanied such a status were far from insignificant. You can think about it and let me know later, Victor said with a laugh. I'm not pushing you on this one. Yeah, just like you didn't push me into playing the game. Adyr retorted with a smug grin. You always know how to dangle the right candy. That, Victor froze for a second, his lips twitching. That wasn't my intention, okay? He looked genuinely guilty, cornered by the truth. I'm just messing with you, Adyr said, letting him off the hook. Then, checking his watch, he added, we don't have much time before class starts. Let's get going before we're late. As he rose, about to leave the room, a thought struck him. He turned back. Any chance you've heard Latin before? But Victor merely stared, clearly oblivious, with no idea what it even was. After the first class, history, where Adyr's inquiries about Latin yielded no answers, the remainder of the day's lessons felt dull and inconsequential. He considered skipping the remaining classes to return home and immerse himself in the game. However, the next shuttle wouldn't depart until evening, and missing classes was a dangerous gambit for someone in his precarious position. Losing his scholarship would jeopardize more than his education. It would unravel the identity he had meticulously constructed. He also noted a thinner attendance than usual in class, which prompted him to ponder the game's increasing influence. Some students were likely still playing, others might have remained home, attempting to recover from the all-too-real trauma the game had inflicted. By the time the day concluded, his patience was worn thin. He boarded the shuttle, finally making his way home, eager to witness the outcome of where he had left off in the game. The moment the shuttle doors slid open, a giant of a man stepped out, wasting no second. His long, purposeful strides devoured the street as if he raced against time. As the evening sky deepened, the few people still lingering on the sidewalks instinctively turned to watch. By now they were accustomed to the sight, and so was Aaron. He didn't slow down, he didn't speak. He moved through the dimming streets, reached his worn front door, and stepped inside without a pause. I'm home, he said, his voice soft, softer than anyone would expect from a man of his build. He stood still for a moment, letting the silence settle, a quiet corner of his heart still waiting, still hoping for a reply. But once again, he was reminded that hope had perished long ago, buried in the stillness. He swiftly removed his mask and protective goggles, then entered the living room. A warm, familiar smile touched his face as he spoke. "Sister, did you get hungry?" The room, the largest in the house, was bright, spotless, and meticulously maintained. At its center stood a hospital bed, surrounded by softly humming medical equipment. There, a girl lay motionless yet awake, her pale green eyes locking onto Aaron's as he entered. For a brief moment they lit up with joy, speaking in place of the voice she no longer possessed. A breathing mask covered her mouth, concealing the faint smile beneath. But that wasn't why she remained silent. She hadn't spoken in years. Her body, slowly deteriorating with each passing day, had long since claimed that ability from her. "Just wait a bit. I'll change my clothes first, then make us some dinner," Aaron said, his tone as soft as he could manage, careful to maintain a slight distance from her. He was afraid that his dusty clothes from outside might somehow harm his already fragile sister. Without hesitation, he rushed to the bathroom and changed into something clean. When he returned, he wore an apron over his white pajamas. "How are you feeling? Any pain?" he asked, his voice tender. When her eyes conveyed the usual signal, "I'm fine," he nodded and quickly hurried back to the kitchen. As Mira listened to the clattering of pots and utensils from the kitchen, she quietly anticipated her favorite daily routine. Finally, her brother's voice reached her. "Today the first class was history. The same professor I told you about before, you know, the really old one." There was a brief pause, followed by the soft sound of plates being set down. "I swear, he's so old I wouldn't be surprised if he had a few skeletons for friends." A faint smile touched Mira's lips. The joke wasn't particularly funny, but she cherished how her usually serious brother consistently tried, always making the effort, and always failing in the most endearing way. As Aaron prepared the meal, he recounted every detail of his day, as if determined to prevent a single moment of silence from settling in the house. His sister had already spent the day trapped within it. If he couldn't banish silence from her world, he could at least keep it out of this room. It was the only thing he had left to give. Soon he returned with 2 bowls of soup, their warmth gently rising into the still air. He fed her with steady hands, 1 spoonful for her, then 1 for himself from his own bowl. It was a simple rhythm, one they had repeated countless times, and he kept talking, calmly and naturally, pausing only when his mouth was full. It wasn't just to fill the silence, it was his way of making the moment feel normal, familiar. Just like when they were children, before their father succumbed to a chronic illness and before their mother, consumed by grief, took her own life. Or at least, back when his sister was still healthy, before she was diagnosed with the same inherited disease that had claimed their father. Now, as Aaron watched her weaken daily, inching closer to the same fate, he was filled with loathing. He questioned what kind of brother he was, if he couldn't even alleviate her pain. But what could he do? He was built like a giant, strong in every way that didn't matter. The university he had fought so hard to enter, the one he'd pursued with a singular purpose, was proving useless. None of it helped. Nothing could halt the disease consuming her. The only thing that could make a difference now was status, sufficient status and wealth to afford a genetic mutation procedure that might save her life. But time was running out, and hope was already gone. After the meal, Aaron attended to her needs. He cleaned the bed sores on her back, massaged her motionless limbs, and checked the generator's fuel, the sole tangible support the university had ever provided. Then he went upstairs to change for work. The 100 credits he received as a scholarship barely covered her daily care and medication. So, at night, he put his naturally gifted strength to use, working grueling shifts as a construction laborer. Once ready, he returned to her door, careful not to step too close. "Mira, I'm heading to work. try to get some sleep, okay?" he said cheerfully. Mira looked at her brother. It was the hardest moment of her day. Every night, at this precise hour, she ached to speak, to beg him to stop. "Brother, it's enough. You've done everything you could. Just let me go, live your life." But the words never came. They couldn't. So she offered him the only thing she had left, a large, heartfelt smile, one she reserved solely for him. Eren returned her smile with one of his own, a wide, comforting grin he had perfected over the years. Then he laced up his worn-out work boots and stepped outside. After locking the door behind him, he paused. The smile that had illuminated his face moments before was gone, and the energy he carried so well had vanished without a trace. It was as if the reality he painstakingly forced himself to ignore had crashed back all at once. It's transferred due to sensation. He leaned against the wall, then slowly slid down until he was sitting on the cold ground. Suddenly, the giant became painfully small. Silent tears escaped his eyes, followed by a shaky breath, then a stifled sob. He prayed in that moment, just as he did every day. Prayed for a miracle to mend his shattered life, a miracle to save his sister. He had heard the stories, read the accounts. He knew miracles weren't merely legends, they were real. Even his mother used to say, "Miracles can come in any form." Of course, that was before she took her own life. Still, he clung to that belief. Because believing that a miracle could happen at any moment was the only way he could keep going. It was the only thing that made the weight bearable. As silent thoughts flooded his mind, his sobs gradually broke the stillness, raw, unfiltered. And then, through the quiet night, another voice slipped into the sound of his grief. "Mr. Eren." Startled, he quickly lifted his head, wiping his eyes, ashamed to be seen like this. Standing before him was a middle-aged man dressed in a blue and gold uniform. But what truly caught Eren off guard was the emblem on his chest, Raven Court Logistics. "Sorry," the man said, glancing down at his notes, equally surprised to see the broken figure before him. "Are you the one residing in this house?" "Yes." "I'm Eren," he replied, still trying to compose himself. "What is this about?" "You have a delivery," the man said simply, extending a box toward him. Eren stared at it blankly, unaware that the miracle he'd been praying for had just arrived in a box. Upon Adyr's arrival home, his virtual adventures wouldn't begin immediately. First, he attended to the dinner Neva had prepared, then cleared the table of dishes. Afterward, at her persistent request, he assisted with her studies. Neva's impending major exam fueled her rising anxiety, and knowing she performed best when collaborating with her brother, she'd found herself importuning him more frequently of late. Only as the evening deepened into night did Adyr finally retire to his private chambers. His first task was to mend the faulty door handle with whatever makeshift tools he had on hand, ensuring his solitude. Next, he replaced yesterday's spent candle with a fresh one, igniting it and positioning the flame so its glow wouldn't interfere with his concentration. Before donning the VR helmet, he performed the familiar physical regimen he'd completed yesterday, seeking to gauge and refine his inherent power. While the bodyweight training offered diminishing physical returns, it remained crucial for honing his control and self-assessment. A new insight also emerged during this process. His initial squishen physical attribute in the game had been 2. Given his lifelong dedication to physical conditioning since childhood, this made perfect sense. If an untrained individual started with a shaven physical stat of 1, then his own double strength logically corresponded to his self-perception. This led him to surmise that the foundational attributes of an ordinary person, physical and potentially all others, likely began at a base value of 1, assuming, of course, the game's metrics genuinely mirrored real-world capabilities. With his preparatory rituals complete, he retrieved the fully charged helmet, settled it over his head, and reclined on the bed. Darkness enveloped his vision. Then, once more, phosphorescent green digits materialized, commencing their familiar countdown. As consciousness reasserted itself, Adyr's eyes opened to the familiar confines of the prison. The implication was immediate and singular. His anticipated escape route had indeed materialized. Yet, a crucial anomaly presented itself. Vesha was conspicuously absent. His mental projection of this scenario had always included her, imprisoned alongside him, with bony fingers scraping against the bars in futile attempts to breach the cell. Puzzled by her disappearance, Adyr surveyed his surroundings, searching for any clue that might account for it. He quickly discerned he wasn't in the specific cell where he'd originally discovered Vesha. This one was 2 doors down. Unlike her former prison, this cell's door was functional, undamaged, and securely closed. With a singular, forceful kick, Adyr shattered the centuries-rusted, decaying door. In stark contrast to the performative, protracted 3-kick sequence he'd used on Vesha's original cell door, this ancient barrier yielded immediately. He then traversed the 2 cells to the spot of her initial discovery and commenced a meticulous examination of the area. The resolution to her disappearance lay within the minutiae left behind. Here, he deduced, was where he had collapsed face first after his logout. Dropping to one knee, his fingers grazed the moist earth. And here, she must have seen him, then crawled forward, only to abruptly halt. Adyr leaned in, scrutinizing the faint impressions she'd etched into the ground. The soil retained its dampness, and though the marks were subtle, they remained legible. A trace of hesitation, he noted. She had moved to check on him, but something, fear or perhaps shock, had caused her to freeze. She likely heard something, he surmised. Skeletons, rushing this way. Panic. Action. She'd grabbed his legs, dragging him 2 cells over. A struggle, certainly, yet she'd succeeded. Remarkable for someone so depleted of energy. Adrenaline, undoubtedly. Adyr paused, a discordant note resonating in his mental reconstruction of the events. A crucial detail eluded his grasp. She hadn't entered the cell, she'd merely secured the door. Why? Did she truly believe she could outpace them? No, that ran counter to her known nature. A frown creased his brow as he began tracking the footprints that led past the cell. Her path led directly into the direction from which the skeletons had advanced. He followed her prints further until they intersected with a distinct, heavier set, unmistakably skeletal. At this juncture, a dark patch of blood stained the ground. So this is what transpired. Adyr mused aloud. He crouched, his fingers brushing the still viscous pool as the narrative clicked into place. She had pulled him into the cell, correctly anticipating the bars wouldn't hold them. Then she'd sealed the door and fled, not to escape, but to divert their attention. A momentary ripple disturbed the calm of his expression. Why? Why such extreme self-sacrifice? A fleeting image pierced his thoughts. The instant he claimed the purple crystal, and Vesha's reaction. What quality did she perceive in me? Who did she imagine me to be, to compel such an exchange? Her life for mine? He murmured, gaze fixed on the crimson hue on his fingertips. A drip pattern, he noted, not indicative of a lethal injury. The dark blood suggested a venous origin, likely from an arm or a superficial chest wound. The volume was insufficient to prove fatal, even for someone of her slight stature. Fortunately, Adyr's inquiries wouldn't remain unaddressed. He was certain Vesha had not succumbed to death. Not yet, at least. While the reason for Vesha's abduction by the skeletons and her current whereabouts remained unknown, these were questions he could resolve once he located her. Without further delay, he rose and resumed his pursuit. He moved with seasoned agility through the cave's intricate, winding passages. Sporadic glimpses of fresh blood, mingled with skeletal prints and drag marks and other signs of conflict, were discernible. Rather than causing alarm, these indicators offered encouragement. Vesha remained among the living. After a period of steady advancement, punctuated by the swift elimination of a few errant skeletons and the absorption of their crystals, Adyr detected voices emanating from the distant end of the tunnel. By the divine authority of Astraeus, I command you, retreat, you foul abominations. Adyr cautiously drew nearer. He finally achieved an unobstructed view of the commotion. The individual was short, no taller than 160 meters, appearing to be in his early 20s. His eyes, wide like Vaishya's, were not her icy blue, but a profound, unyielding black. He wielded a short sword in one hand, a round shield in the other, and was clad in medieval-style plate armor, metallic and robust, safeguarding most of his body save for the joints. Adyr's initial deduction suggested he might be one of Vaishya's accompanying guards. 3 skeletons assailed the man, driving him relentlessly backward. He appeared both exhausted and injured, and the blunt force weapons wielded by the skeletons provided a distinct advantage against his round shield. The skirmish was clearly in its final moments, the outcome already predetermined. Adyr, however, had no intention of intervening. He merely observed. Soon enough, weariness claimed the man. His shield arm fell, leaving his head vulnerable and perfectly positioned for a crushing blow. He crumpled, unconscious, yet still breathing. To Adyr's silent gratification, the skeletons withheld a killing blow. Instead, they seized him and began dragging him deeper into the tunnels. They were transporting him to an undisclosed location, which, Adyr surmised, was precisely where he needed to go. For 30 minutes, Adyr stealthily shadowed the skeletons as they dragged the man through the twisting tunnels. He maintained absolute concealment, meticulously avoiding any motion that might betray his presence. Finally, the winding passage opened into an immense cavern. The sheer scale of the space was breathtaking. Gazing upward, Adyr saw countless cerulean crystals embedded in the ceiling, shimmering like distant stars, casting a brilliant radiance that bathed the entire chamber in a glow akin to an artificial sun. As the skeletons proceeded to drag their captive down a sloping side path toward the chamber's lower tier, Adyr concealed himself behind a massive boulder, observing the scene from his elevated vantage point. This, he concluded, must be their assembly point. Below, at least 100 skeletons were arrayed, and that wasn't even the most peculiar aspect. Each one knelt, arms raised, all facing a singular direction in an act of what appeared to be collective worship. At the heart of their devotion, perched on a stone platform, sat a pristine white bird. "A dungeon boss," he murmured. She murmured. His instincts, honed by countless hours in old MMORPGs, suggested it. Yet, it was far too diminutive to fit the archetype. As Adyr scrutinized the bird, seemingly unremarkable, yet possessing an odd ethereal quality, a familiar phenomenon recurred. Green text materialized before his eyes, a system message conveying fresh data. Spark detected. Name: Dawn Raven. Path: Astra. Ability: Life Grace. Description: Dawn. Born from the remnants of the fallen on battlefields, dawn ravens dwell in luminous, frigid climes. They subsist on fresh meat and the life essence of their prey. Though their abilities often lead to their misidentification as netherpath creatures, their influence extends solely to physical matter, firmly anchoring them to the astropath. Usually lethargic and non-aggressive, they are easily captured, but seldom encountered in isolation. Their fiercely loyal guardians demand constant vigilance. Ability: Life Grace. Dawn ravens are known as grateful sparks, rewarding benevolent acts with potent power. In return for sustenance, they impart a fragment of their unique life force, transmuting their prey's physical forms into animate skeletons beholden to their command, thereby granting them an unnaturally prolonged existence. As he absorbed the description and cast his gaze upon the raven, a realization struck him. This was the very spark Vaishya had spoken of, the one she relentlessly sought. A particular phrase in the text had captured his attention. Initially, he'd presumed it to be a boss creature meant for combat and plunder, but the inclusion of catch radically altered his perception. For the first time, the vacant spark slot on his status panel gained clarity. The true nature of this game remained largely enigmatic, yet he felt as though he had just uncovered another layer of its mechanics, a power system incorporating active abilities. "Oh, damn, a necromancer! How utterly cliché," he muttered, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features as he pondered the ramifications of the ability. But he swiftly reined himself in. It was premature to leap to conclusions. Furthermore, a more pressing issue demanded his immediate attention. Pulling his attention from the luminous bird, he observed two forms lying near the core of the skeletal assembly. The third, having been conveyed this entire distance, was moments away from joining them. One was a man, garbed in metallic armor, similar to the one he'd just witnessed. The other was his primary objective. Vaisha lay in a state of semi-consciousness, her eyelids flickering open and shut. She fought to maintain her grip on reality, battling against the encroaching haze of fading awareness. Still clinging to life, Vaisha's complexion was unnervingly pallid. A substantial amount of blood had already been lost, and the flow continued. A growing pool of crimson darkened the ground beneath her. Her remaining time was clearly limited. Yet, the subsequent events swiftly rendered her blood loss a secondary worry. Adyr's suspicions were confirmed. The skeletons hauling the third man did not deposit him alongside the previous two. Instead, they advanced past the worshipping circle, directly towards the elevated stone platform where the Dawn Raven resided. There, they laid the unconscious man at the bird's feet, then receded, dropping to their knees and raising their arms in the same silent veneration as the others. It was unmistakably a ritual, a sacrifice. The Dawn Raven remained motionless for a beat, its gaze fixed upon the offering. Then, with a sudden, silent cry, it unfurled its wings and descended gracefully to the man's side. What ensued was a sight sufficient to curdle the blood of any observer possessing a modicum of empathy. With an abrupt, precise jab of its beak, the raven swiftly plucked out one of the man's eyes, swallowing it whole in a single fluid motion. The man was violently wrenched back to consciousness by a wave of excruciating pain. He screamed, thrashing wildly, desperate to flee the unimaginable agony. But the two skeletons positioned at his sides pounced, pinning his limbs to the ground with an iron grip. "Release me, you accursed fiends! Let go, Kamati!" But neither the skeletons nor the raven acknowledged his pleas. The bird continued its gruesome task without interruption. Each subsequent strike of its beak tore another fragment of flesh from the man's body. Blood spattered across its pristine white plumage, staining it a vivid crimson. The man's resistance waned with each consumed piece, until his body, organs, and all was almost entirely gone. Adyr observed the entirety of the horrifying spectacle with an impassive expression. The carnage did not visibly affect him. If anything, a fleeting hint of disinterest or mild disapproval crossed his face. As he continued to watch, the raven at last ceased its feeding. With blood-drenched wings outstretched, it emitted a soft green beam that descended upon the mangled remnants. The instant the ritual commenced, the kneeling skeletons throughout the chamber, previously unnervingly still, began to clack their jaws. The sound reverberated through the cavern like a skeletal chorus, sharp and deeply unsettling. In a matter of seconds, the verdant light consumed every last vestige of blood and flesh. It burned like an internal fire, reducing the remains to fine ash. Even the crimson staining the raven's feathers vaporized, restoring its immaculate white plumage. Then, the true metamorphosis began. The man's skeleton, the sole component untouched by the purifying flame, commenced its alteration. The bones thickened, acquiring a metallic sheen, and expanded in proportion, his limbs elongated, his posture reconfigured. His new frame now perfectly matched that of the other skeletons. As the ritual's luminescence waned, a faint stream of green energy branched off, extending towards the two skeletons who had presented the offering. Their fragile, age-worn bones shimmered momentarily, then visibly gained density, strength, and restoration. The clatter of their jaws intensified, sharper now, echoing with a sound that bordered on anticipation. Moments later, the light entirely dissipated. The Dawn Raven folded its wings and resettled on its platform. Below, the newly animated skeleton slowly ascended to its feet, only to kneel once more, raising its arms towards the bird in silent, profound devotion. "Quite a spectacle," Adyr commented, his eyes gleaming with a detached interest. The grand finale, in particular, truly grasped the essence. Such drama is rarely found in modern theatres. The process of consumption itself hadn't appealed to his sensibilities, being overly messy and devoid of grace. Nevertheless, he conceded the conclusion had been impactful. Like a seasoned critic, he mentally jotted down a few observations before redirecting his attention. Now, his agenda comprised two distinct objectives. Firstly, he needed to extricate Vesha before she expired. This impetus stemmed not from sentimentality, gratitude, or some misguided heroic impulse. His concern for her survival was strictly utilitarian. Vesha possessed vital information he required, and crucially, she held considerable standing in this realm, particularly within the Valari kingdom. Her influence, he calculated, could forge a new trajectory for him once they emerged from this cavern. His second aim was the capture of the Dawn Raven. The precise rarity or value remained unknown, yet the fact that Vesha and her retinue had risked their very lives to find it was sufficiently indicative. Such assets rarely presented themselves. Two significant impediments stood between him and these aspirations. The primary obstacle was time. He had already spent a half-hour tracking the skeletons, followed by almost 20 minutes observing the ritual. Should he fail to act within the next 2 hours or so, the likelihood was high that upon his next login, Vesha would have transcended her humanity to become another member of the skeletal horde. Furthermore, Adyr had never favored overt, brute force heroics. He preferred a calculated approach, one of precision, not the brawler on the front lines, but the concealed blade striking from the shadows. After several more minutes of strategic calculation and planning, Adyr finalized his chosen tactic. "Now," he murmured, a faint smile playing on his lips. "It's time to script the main character's grand entrance." Teal, his act was about to commence. As Vesha lay prone, a thought pressed upon her mind with the same brutal weight as the agony crushing her chest. Each fleeting second siphoned more warmth from her body. She fought desperately to retain consciousness, forcing her eyes open, searching for any flicker, any fragile thread of hope to extricate her from this nightmare. But all that met her gaze was abject horror. One of her devoted guards had just been consumed, only to reanimate as a mindless skeleton. That image solidified it, the ultimate blow, the final fracture in her waning hope. The realization settled deep within her soul as an undeniable truth. Nothing remained but surrender. She closed her eyes. Then, amidst the encroaching darkness, she perceived a light. A silhouette emerged, impossibly tall, towering far beyond the stature of anyone she had ever encountered in the kingdom. His face appeared cold, inscrutable, yet even that mask could not fully conceal an underlying warmth. On the precipice of death, Vesha instinctively breathed his name. In the void, she envisioned him, not as he truly was, but as the champion of her fading consciousness, striding into the gloom like a legendary knight. A faint smile graced her pale lips, unaware she was adrift in a dream. He was a practitioner, one not merely shaped by destiny, but forged to carve his own unique path, the sort whose mere presence heralded peace for kingdoms and dread for their adversaries. And if he was the one who elected to rescue her, who in their right mind would dare oppose him? Now the vision became perfectly clear. They would walk out of this cold cave, hand in hand, returning to the kingdom. She saw her father, resplendent in his favorite uniform, and her mother beside him, adorned in her brightest jewels, both awaiting them in the city square. The joyous multitude, the envious gazes of her spiteful cousins. Even the king himself was present, with the queen at his side, bearing witness to the momentous occasion. And there he stood, tall, unwavering, revered by all, beside her, their hands intertwined. Then, with perfect clarity, she heard the high priest's voice, smiling as he declared, under the sacred watch of God Astraeus, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Teal. She turned to him. The moment had arrived. The kiss. A blush bloomed on her face as their eyes met, her heart a frantic flutter. His lips parted. Are you all right? He asked. She smiled, touched by his concern. Yes, I am. I'm so happy. Appanate. As she rose on tiptoe, leaning in for the kiss, her eyes gently closing, his voice pierced through the fantasy, sharper, more insistent. Hey, open your eyes. Are you all right? Hemanate. I said I'm all right. Can you please stop asking? She whispered, a hint of frustration coloring her tone. She closed her eyes again, pushing forward to consummate the kiss that would seal their union. This time, however, hands gripped her shoulders, shaking her. I said, open your eyes. You're not dead yet. Hemanate. Finally, she truly returned to herself, to reality. Adyr crouched before her, studying her with an odd expression. Well, he said, a faint smile touching his lips. For a moment there, I thought we'd lost you. Though her body felt numb, chilled as if at death's threshold, Vesha's cheeks flushed crimson with embarrassment. She first averted her gaze, then lifted her head again, asking in a tremulous voice, are you here to rescue me? Before he could reply, her perception of her surroundings fully registered. The circle of skeletons remained motionless, still locked in their unnerving postures. One of her guards lay unconscious beside her, or more plausibly, deceased. And the devil raven, the creature that would undoubtedly populate her future nightmares, still reposed on its perch, calm and utterly indifferent. She turned back to Adyr. He bore no resemblance to the savior of her fantasies, no hero descending from the light. He looked exactly like her, another prisoner, another offering. Observing the questioning, anxious glint in her eyes, Adyr spoke with a steady calm. Yes, I'm here to get you out. And don't worry, I have a plan. He tore several long strips from her dress, swiftly pressing them against the wound on her chest, binding them tightly to staunch the blood flow. All I require from you, Adyr stated rapidly, is to lie still and feign death. The dawn raven consumes only life energy, and the skeletons do not present lifeless bodies as offerings. This was the deduction he had made after scrutinizing the preceding ritual and assimilating the creature's description. But don't actually die, just pretend. Keep your mind alert. Given the substantial blood loss she had already sustained, he considered that addendum essential. With Vesha's wounds carefully bandaged and her form settled as comfortably as possible, using the lifeless soldier as a makeshift cushion, Adyr prepared himself for the impending ritual. His strategy was deceptively simple. He had deliberately allowed the patrolling skeletons to capture him. This infiltration granted him the opportunity to assess Vesha's injury and provide crucial first aid. Once confident she could endure a little longer, he would ensure his selection for the next sacrifice. The instant he found himself nearest the dawn raven, vulnerable and exposed, he would strike, seizing it in a single, decisive motion. The repercussions for the remaining skeletons, should he capture or destroy the creature, remained an unanswered question, but one he was prepared to set aside for the moment. It's starting, Adyr observed, seeing the two skeletons that had brought him here begin to stir. His theory proved correct. They entirely disregarded the other two nearby bodies. Their attention was fixated solely on him, the potent source of radiating life energy. Be gentle, gentlemen, Adyr murmured, offering his arms for their grasp. As a designated sacrifice, he was acutely aware of his stipulated rites and the ritualistic protocols he needed to follow. As long as he played his part flawlessly, the plan would unfold as intended. The skeletal figures gripped his arms, commencing their drag towards the stone platform, mirroring the path of the previous offering. Adyr gazed up at the dawn raven, then knelt beneath the platform, adopting the same supplicant posture as the skeletons surrounding him. He raised his arms, precisely mimicking their stance. An earlier observation had highlighted the skeleton's apparent simplicity. They moved like programmed automata, responding only to specific commands and operating within a rigid task-reward framework. As long as their established protocol remained undisturbed, they did not intervene, and so far it hadn't. Witnessing his willing prostration, the two escorting skeletons seemingly deemed him no threat. They lowered themselves beside him, assuming the identical prayer-like position. With every obstacle removed, only one final action remained, allowing the Dawn Raven to draw sufficiently close. Under his unwavering gaze, the raven slowly unfurled its wings and descended from the platform, approaching steadily. Adyr remained motionless, his eyes locked onto the creature. As the Dawn Raven neared, he met its gaze directly. Those abyssal, pitch-black eyes. "What kind of creature are you?" he mused involuntarily. He had peered into the eyes of countless beings throughout his life, human, animal, living, dead. He had always understood precisely what he beheld, especially the eyes of those whose souls were departing. Those were moments he relished most. But now, staring into the Dawn Raven's eyes, what he perceived disconcerted him. It was not life he witnessed, nor was it death he sensed. It was something familiar. Something he had encountered before, yet couldn't quite pinpoint. For a fleeting moment, he wrestled for the right word. Then it struck him. It felt familiar, and yet he couldn't recall whose eyes they were, because those eyes had never belonged to anyone else, only to him. The very same eyes that reflected back at him whenever he looked into a mirror. "You're just like me, aren't you?" he whispered, his voice cold and calm. "A monster, simply trying to survive the existence forced upon you." Then, without a moment's hesitation, he lunged forward, wrapping the strip of cloth, torn from Vesha's dress, tightly around the raven's wings and head, subduing it in one swift, practiced motion. As the raven struggled in his grasp, he felt its frantic heartbeat beneath its feathers. "Don't be afraid. I'm not going to hurt you," he said soothingly, gently stroking its wings. But then, a sudden, sharp sense of peril galvanized him. He sprang back, narrowly evading an axe that cleaved down from above, missing him by inches. "What the hell? Don't you see I'm holding your god, or whatever it is, hostage? Do you want it dead?" he bellowed, quickly raising the raven aloft for all to see. Before he could even register the skeleton's response to his audacious act, a text prompt materialized before him. "You captured a spark. Do you want to start your evolution process? Cost, 20 energy. Evolutionary step, Dawn Human. Unlock Sanctuary. Unlock Spark." Adyr gave the text a fleeting glance before dismissing it. This was not the time for distractions. The instant the skeletons saw their cherished Dawn Raven in his hands, they froze. A sudden, absolute silence fell, not a single sound, as if the entire chamber had momentarily glitched. Precisely as Adyr had anticipated. The skeletons, governed by basic instincts and restricted logic, found themselves unable to process the unprecedented situation. Confronted with a scenario outside their programmed protocol, they stalled, paralyzed by uncertainty. "Don't try anything clever. One move and it dies," Adyr warned, beginning to navigate his way through the ranks of motionless skeletons. He had arrived here intending to be the protagonist, yet somehow found himself feeling more like a second-rate villain in a cheap drama. Not that he particularly minded, he was enjoying it more than he cared to admit. Without interruption, he reached Vesha's side. "Are you awake?" he inquired. At the sound of his voice, she slowly opened her eyes and mumbled, "Yes." But as Adyr looked into her eyes, he recognized her precarious state. He could see it, the fading soul, the dimming life force ebbing away. "You're a strong woman, aren't you?" he said softly, gently placing the Dawn Raven in her lap. Then he guided her hands to secure it. "Just hold on to this for a while. I'm trusting you with it. Just hang in there a little longer. We're getting out of here." With that, he lifted her into his arms, cradling her as if she were a princess, and began to move. For a moment, Vesha felt his warmth infuse her frozen body. She tightened her grip around the creature in her arms. She didn't know what it was, but Adyr had entrusted it to her, and she was resolute in fulfilling that duty before her time expired. Adyr noticed the small gesture. She truly possessed an iron will, and even that single simple task might be enough to keep her clinging to life a little longer. Just before exiting the chamber, Adyr paused, glancing back one last time. The horde of skeletons stood motionless beneath the cold glow of the crystals, silent, helpless, utterly devoid of will. "I'll return for the purple crystals," he thought, his eyes narrowing. But not today. Today he departed with something far more valuable. With Vesha cradled in his arms and the dawn raven resting securely in hers, Adyr navigated the labyrinthine cave with practiced ease. For him, the simplest way to find his path was by following footprints. The cave's slightly damp soil, untouched by wind or weather, had preserved every step with perfect clarity, offering him an infallible guide through the stone corridors. During this journey, the wandering skeletons encountered in the passages posed no threat. Simply displaying the dawn raven was enough to short-circuit whatever primitive logic they operated on. Meanwhile, Adyr kept Vesha engaged, conversing with her to maintain her mental activity, anything to keep her awake. At least until he could be certain the bleeding from her chest had fully ceased, and her dehydrated body received water and nourishment. "Back in the prison area, why did you save me?" he asked. "Why risk your own life for mine?" His voice remained gentle, yet firm enough to prevent someone on the brink of sleep from slipping away. "I." Vesha's pale, cracked lips parted as she took a moment to gather her thoughts. Her voice emerged weak, heavy with exhaustion. "In the Church of Astra, the first 3 things they teach every follower are serve, obey, and sacrifice." Adyr raised an eyebrow. "Serve who?" "The practitioners of the 4 paths." She replied, her words drawing out, growing slower with each syllable. "Practitioners? Am I a practitioner?" He inquired, a hint of curiosity entering his tone. "You're tall." It was the 3rd time across both his lives that someone had called him tall, and all 3 times it had been her. But Adyr showed no reaction. The repetition was no coincidence. It was a clear sign her mind was beginning to falter. "Hey, stay with me," Adyr said firmly, noting her consciousness fading. Holding her steady while trying to move swiftly wasn't easy, but he pushed his pace as much as the terrain allowed. To complicate matters, the charge on his game helmet was running low. If he didn't escape the cave and reach a safe location soon, it wouldn't just be Vesha in danger, he would be too. "Are you still holding the dawn raven? Make sure you don't drop it," Adyr said, hoping for some response, and he received one. "Raven?" Vesha blinked open her tired eyes and glanced down at the bundle in her arms. "Ra, Raven!" She flinched at the sight of the very creature that had tormented her moments ago. Briefly shocked, but her grip did not loosen. She held it tight. Adyr chuckled. At least it worked. It had pulled her back, if only slightly. It might be enough to keep her mind occupied for a while longer. And the exit was close now. He could feel the shift in the air, the still, heavy atmosphere of the cave broken by a faint breeze brushing against his skin. They were near. And then came the light at the end of the tunnel. "We're out." "Look, the light," he said. But when he noticed her eyes fixated on the raven, observing its every movement with tense concentration, he decided to let her be. Stepping outside, the air greeted him like a forgotten memory. Crisp and clean, it flooded his lungs, so pure it stung slightly. But the sting was not unpleasant. It was oddly satisfying. His chest rose slowly as he inhaled, and for a brief moment, he simply stood there, allowing the scent of damp earth and wild grass to inundate his senses. Then, lifting his gaze, he saw it. The sky. Night had fallen, yet overhead hung not a moon, but a sun. Not warm, not golden. It glowed in quiet defiance of the darkness, shrouded in drifting shades of black and white, monochrome and unreal. like a pale, lidless eye staring through a veil of smoke, unfamiliar, wrong, a sun or a moon that belonged to no sky he had ever known. To the right, the forest began. The ground was covered in lush green grass, and two lively creatures grazed peacefully, Usians, ruthless. They resembled horses, but their fur was a deep blue, patterned with white spots that mirrored stars in the night sky. Their manes were dark, like shadows, as if the night itself had brushed over them. Not far from them stood a carriage, wooden yet well-crafted and elegant in design. On its side was a crest Adyr recognized. "This must be their carriage," he murmured, glancing at Vesha. The crest was identical to the one he had seen engraved on the breastplates of the warriors inside the cave. Without wasting time, Adyr carried Vesha towards the carriage. He pulled back the canvas flap and stepped inside. It seemed like a good shelter. The calmly grazing animals outside and the untouched carriage, clearly undisturbed for at least 3 days, were enough to convince him this place was safe. The interior was clean and surprisingly comfortable. He laid her down gently on a soft blanket, then checked her wound. The bandage was dry, with no new blood. That was a good sign. The bleeding had stopped. He began searching the space. In one corner, he found small leather flasks filled with water. In another, a box containing food supplies. Inside a smaller compartment, he discovered a pouch of white powder. A quick taste confirmed it was salt. He added a pinch of it to the flask, then crushed a few hard, lemon-flavored candies into powder and mixed them in too. After shaking the flask well, he returned to Vesha. Her eyes were open, still fixed on the raven, but now they seemed to drift, her focus slipping. "Hey, can you look at me?" Adyr asked, helping her sit up slightly. "I want you to drink this, but first, I need you to talk to me." He wanted to ensure her reflexes were intact. Giving her water when she couldn't swallow properly would only risk choking her. A stupid way to die after coming this far. "I'm not thirsty, just tired," Vesha said weakly, her gaze shifting to the flask. "Just a little. Can you do it for me?" he said gently, and without waiting for an answer, allowed a few drops to fall into her mouth. She managed to swallow. That was enough. After days of nothing, something with real nutrients was finally reaching her system. She still looked as if she could expire at any moment, but at least now there was a chance. Adyr checked his mental timer, roughly half an hour left. He gave her a bit more water, then carefully replaced the non-sterile bandages with clean fabric he'd found inside the carriage. He even changed her torn and dirty clothes, down to her underwear, using a spare set he'd come across. Once he was done, he laid her down, covered her tightly, and stepped outside. Wasting no time, he started a fire. Using the camp supplies and whatever vegetables and meat he'd found, edible or at least appearing so, he threw together a quick soup in a large pot. After a small taste, he couldn't help but briefly acknowledge his own cooking skills with a nod of approval. Even the system concurred, sending a message acknowledging his culinary talent. He dismissed it without a second thought. Not enough. Noting energy to register it anyway. Then, without delay, he brought the pot back into the carriage. The air was a little cold, and it would only grow colder as night deepened. The heat from the soup might help warm the space, even if just a little. And with any luck, the smell of food might lead Vesha into better dreams. If she woke up hungry while he was gone, well, that was a bonus he'd planned for. Once everything was in place, Adyr lay down beside her. He made sure their bodies shared enough warmth. With roughly 10 minutes of charge left, there was no point in drawing it out. He'd done everything he could. The rest was in fate's hands. "Fuck fate," Adyr muttered, and logged out. When Adyr removed the game helmet, the soft glow of candlelight filled his vision. A quick glance at the clock confirmed it was already 8 p.m. He plugged the helmet into charge, awaiting the return of power, then completed his usual workout routine and headed downstairs. The scene was familiar. In the softly lit living room, Marielle had returned from work and was resting on the couch, visibly exhausted. Neva sat at the table, engrossed in her books, quietly studying. Noticing her brother, Neva looked up and asked with a curious, slightly surprised tone, "You're still playing the game, brother?" "Yes," Adyr replied as he slowly took a seat. Her blue eyes widened, visibly lighting up. "Wow, you're so close to being famous then." Adyr chuckled. He knew what she meant. She'd probably been reading forums and posts about the game, about the exceedingly low survival rate and the dwindling number of active players. Not wanting the conversation to delve deeper, he casually picked up one of the open books in front of her and began assisting with her schoolwork. While the two siblings studied together, Marielle quietly approached. Placing a gentle hand on Neva's head, she asked with a warm smile, "How's it going, The fatigue in Marielle's eyes was obvious. She clearly needed rest. Yet it was just as clear that she wanted to spend at least a little time with her children. Still, Adyr noticed something else. A subtle shift in her tone, a faint tension in her movements, signs of something more on her mind. He didn't press her, though. If she wished to talk, she would. After a bit of light family conversation, Marielle finally articulated what had been weighing on her. "I'll be away for a few days a week at most." Neva immediately turned her head, eyes wide with concern. "Why?" she asked, worry plain in her voice. Seeing her daughter's reaction, Marielle gently stroked her head again, attempting to soothe her. "There's a village about a day outside the city walls. An informer told us there are children there in poor condition. We're going to check the situation and, if possible, bring those in need back to the city orphanage." A heavy silence settled over the room. Everyone understood the implications of leaving the city. The moment one stepped beyond the walls, the world transformed. Unlike the structured safety of urban life, what awaited outside was chaos, filled with people who had nothing to lose and nothing they wouldn't do to survive. Noticing the shift in mood, Marielle offered a quick smile, attempting to ease the tension. "Come on now, no need to worry. It's not my first expedition, you know that." Tantaling mentida de hev. It's really you malakwati the matin you doing Sadan. But the longest you've been gone was 2 days, Neva said immediately, her voice rising as her eyes began to well up. "And you never went this far. I know, but really, don't worry," Marielle said, her tone gentle. "Besides, STF will be escorting us. They'll make sure nothing goes wrong." It was clear she trusted them. After all, the STF Superhuman Task Force was the city's most capable and well-equipped force. Still, Neva said, clearly unconvinced. Her eyes shifted to her brother, hoping he would interject, but Adyr remained silent. He knew that no matter what he said, it wouldn't change anything. Marielle's sense of duty and her instinct to protect children ran too deep. Only one sentence felt appropriate in that moment. "Just make sure you're careful." "Haha, I will, don't worry," Marielle said with a laugh as she pulled her son into a hug. She had always known Adyr possessed a quiet wisdom beyond his years, and once again he understood her without the need for many words. Her gaze shifted to Neva, her sweet, worried daughter, and she gently reached out to her as well, holding them both close. "There are so many children out there, not as fortunate as we are, just waiting for a single adult to reach out and change everything," Marielle said softly, her tone tinged with sadness, especially for Neva's sake. Neva glanced at Adyr, almost instinctively. He had once been one of those children, and every day she was grateful he was now her brother. That was why she couldn't bring herself to argue anymore. All that remained was a simple, heartfelt request. "Just make sure they're safe. And you too." After unburdening herself and receiving her children's quiet support, Marielle stayed with them a little longer. They talked, laughed, and enjoyed each other's company for hours. Eventually, as the night wore on, everyone retreated to their rooms. "STF, huh?" Adyr murmured as he lay in bed. Victor's offer echoed in his mind. If he joined this new division and gained an identity like the STF, the potential advantages were clear. He weighed the possibilities in silence and eventually drifted off to sleep, those thoughts still circling in his head. When morning came, Adyr rose and followed his usual routine. He watched the sunrise for a few quiet minutes, performed some light exercise, spent a bit of time in the bathroom, then went downstairs to prepare breakfast for his family. He brewed tea for them, made himself a bitter coffee, and returned to his room. Opening his laptop, he browsed through social media and forums to check for any new information about the game. Although the game was still trending and riding the hype, there wasn't much he could use. No one had mentioned anything about genetic mutations either. For a moment, Adyr found himself wondering if the government was actively suppressing that information. The only notable update he came across was that production and sales of game helmets had been halted. Apparently, helmets of players who died in-game had also ceased functioning entirely, and refunds were being offered to those who requested them. There was even an official statement from the city manager openly apologizing for the technical issues and admitting they had failed to meet the public's expectations. "They're trying to kill the hype," Adyr speculated. The 12-city government, which had once played a major role in promoting the game's success, now appeared determined to declare it a failure and shut it down completely. Laptop closed and clothes swapped, Adyr descended the stairs to find Marielle and Neva already seated at the breakfast table. He wished Marielle a safe journey, then stepped out into the world. It remained as bleak as ever. Sickly yellow clouds hung heavy, intercepting the sun's brilliance before it could truly touch the ground. The air, thick, dry and oppressive, pressed in around him. Compared to the pristine, peaceful atmosphere of the game world, this reality felt utterly flat and drained. Yet, in its own way, it possessed an austere beauty, one sculpted by ruin and relentless endurance. Though his enhanced physique stat rendered a mask or goggles unnecessary to brave the air, he wore them regardless, less out of need, more to sidestep unwelcome questions he wasn't inclined to answer. When the shuttle idled at the curb, Adyr boarded silently. The usual faces filled the interior, save for Erin. Adyr noted the absence with a private smile, completing the commute in quiet contemplation. The university district thrummed with noticeably more activity than the day before. Students, having emerged from their brief immersion in the game, were evidently resuming their customary schedules. Not all, however. Victor was conspicuously absent, no doubt already consumed by his father's newest endeavor. Still, amidst the throng, familiar faces emerged. Traversing the corridor to his first class, Adyr's gaze snagged on Cole, the campus's infamous bully, the very one who'd split his lip mere days prior. But Cole seemed altered. Very note. Flanked by his usual cohort, he strode past Adyr without a single word, devoid of his typical sneer or even a sidelong glance. A full cast encased one of his arms, and his lip looked recently resplit. Adyr, too, remained silent. The game had blunted the persistent urge for violence, the old bloodlust. He no longer sought out confrontation. Then, just outside the classroom, his eyes found her. A cascade of midnight purple hair, smooth as velvet, reached her waist, reminiscent of twilight caught between day and night. Her perfectly matching eyes were soft, distant, and held a profound quietude. They were like puppy eyes, yet heavy-lidded, as if burdened by too much witnessed. An unreadable pallor settled on her face, suggesting thoughts too remote for fathom. Still, that silence contained an unvoiced fragility, stirring an ancient protective instinct within him. It was a face that compelled silent, unreasoning protection. Selena White, a touch taller than Adyr, her black and white uniform hugged her form with tailored precision, its every line and fold echoing her inherent poise. Utterly still, she exuded an unforced elegance. Students passing by risked covert glances. Some even twisted their heads for a second look, stumbling as they forgot their footing, all for another glimpse of the campus's most revered girl. When Adyr approached, Selena's gaze lifted, and a brief small smile touched her lips, a rare yet unmistakably true sight. "Selena," Adyr offered, a subtle smile mirroring hers, "a surprise to find you here." Their paths rarely crossed in class. Usually she'd be on the opposite side of campus at this hour. "I'm waiting for the teacher," she replied, her gaze flickering away as her fingers unconsciously sought her hair, a telltale sign of nerves. A short silence ensued. When Adyr offered no further words, she met his eyes again. "Did you receive the gift I sent?" she inquired. "Yes, thank you," Adyr affirmed. "The cake, particularly. My sister adored it." Selena maintained her smile, but her tone subtly altered. "I see." Adyr's gaze dropped to her right hand, noting the faint bruising and redness on her knuckles. His mind instantly veered back to Cole, his unusual silence, the battered state of his face. A silent sigh escaped him, though his expression remained neutral. He offered no comment. Selena hesitated, seemingly on the verge of speaking, yet unable to articulate her thoughts. The silence lengthened, growing faintly uncomfortable, before she finally broke it. I should leave," she whispered, her gaze barely brushing his. "My class is about to begin." A momentary pause, then she turned and moved away, as quietly as she'd appeared, leaving scarcely a trace. Adyr waited until Selena's figure vanished down the hall before finally entering the classroom. The day's curriculum held little appeal.